Hi, hi, and welcome to the afterlife. Um, so tonight I'm gonna take a look at the afterlife. People don't like to talk about transitionings. They don't like to talk about death. They don't like to talk about. Some people who has loved ones left died. Obviously, this is if this is very sensitive for you. I put a trigger warning. Just don't watch it because if it's sensitive, I'm not gonna go into like all that other stuff. I'm just gonna go in about the death and life after death and um, show some children who's come back, who's died and come back basically. So um, yeah, it's just gonna be one of those types. I might even open up the panel if it's so be if so be it. If there's a few people in. So let me just show you some nice scenery. Is this one? Settle down, sit back, and let's get into the build because, right, we talk about getting to know ourselves, and this is all part of getting to know yourself because death is really a transitioning into the next life or the next becoming, or it's a transformation. It's not like all doom and gloom. So when you think of of one who's left or died or however you want to put the words, um, and also, yeah, I've got a tip for you as well. Now, those who have loved ones passed, um, the best thing is to set them a nice little table, a little space, and you right would because they literally come an ancestor and a gungun, however, if you want to look at it in them terms, and you therefore can set up a table with their faces, the when you go to the funeral, you get those little books. You can put those little books. You can put crystals. You can put food for them if you choose their favorite drink, favorite beverage. There's ways of doing this. I might do a build on it, but just for as I'm talking about it, it all marries together. Um, in New Orleans, I think it's New Orleans. They set a space for the one who's passed, the grandmother, grandfather, mother. No, that's the best way to remember a loved one. So, I just thought I'd give those tips. Anyway, on with the build. So you always start off with how other I think is how other beliefs look at death because they don't all look at them the same. So um, what I've done, I went and I searched for information. Let's get rid of this. And I've looked at 15 afterlife beliefs from different religions. What do you believe about life after death? Is it just a myth for you, or do you actually believe that the grave is not the end? Most people grow up in societies where the introduction into religion. Uh, what do you believe about life after death? Is it a myth for you, or do you actually believe the grave is? Oh, yeah, they already said that part. Most people grow in societies where the introduction into religion happens as soon as they are born. The chances of such people holding onto their faith and beliefs to the day they die are very high. Social influence coupled with today's media, peer pressure play a a huge role in shaping what we believe as well as questioning what we believe. That all makes it very difficult for people to think about life after death objectively, as opposed to learning on what they have known was true from as far back as they can remember. People who only know what their religion says about life after death find what other people believe to be absurd and to some extent funny and impractical. But is there a way of proving which religion is right or which is wrong? People who embrace science to the extent that they stop believing in religion, life after death, because they find evidence and cannot find any form of measurement for it, to dismiss all religions as a whole. However, should we expect the matters concerning life after death be measurable in a laboratory or in a field? Like other things on this side of life, wouldn't try to conduct that experiment to be like trying to measure the speed of wind or inflammatory of some materials when you are underwater. It makes no sense. Here are 15 religions from different parts of the world, what they believe about life after death. What do you think? Greco-Roman religion. The ancient Greeks believed that people died and ended in Hades, a grey and misty place where the Lord of Death ruled. Others believed in paradise-like place called Olympic Pantheon on Mount Olympus, where gods such as Zeus lived and decided the fate of humanity. The people who lived a good life was consistently in the minds of the living and enjoyed sunny pleasures of Elysium. Those forgotten wandered eternally in the bleakness of Hades, where the wicked fell into the dark pits called Titus, Tartarus. Although the gods decided the fate of every individual on earth, someone could control this fate through divination and sacrifices to them. Epicurus. Epicurus? Oh, I don't know, I might have said it wrong. The religion known as Epicureanism is approximately 300 years older than Christianity. It has an unclear number of beliefs in Greece and other parts of the world today. Unlike most other religions on the planet, Epicureans believes in many gods, but one of them takes notice of what human beings are up to. The believers are the believers here think that everything, including their gods and souls, is made up of atoms. Furthermore, according to Epicurus, there is no afterlife, so nothing like reincarnation, heaven or hell exists to them. When an individual dies, the believers are here believes that the soul also dissolves and that becomes the end of them. Baha'i Baha'i is a religion made up of approximately 7 million people. The believers here consider that the soul of a human being is eternal and good, and it is the work of every individual to draw closer to God. Unlike most other religions that have their own specific God, the Baha'i believe in one God who has shown himself through all other religions in the world. According to Baha'i followers, heaven and hell do not exist. The two are states of being either close to or far from God. The Baha'i believe that most other religious groups are mistaken when they interpret heaven and hell to be the physical places as opposed to seeing them as symbolic and representations of distance from God. Jainism. Jainism. The approximately 4 million Jainism followers believes in existence of many gods. and reincarnation until liberation, li- libation. A libation that is achieved through the accordance of bad karma, and causing no harm. People who do not achieve liberation continue in the cycle of rebirth, and some might even have to go through 8 hells of suffering before rebirth. The 8 hells get colder at every stage, and a soul passes through oh my, the soul passes through a lot of torture before getting another opportunity for rebirth and to another chance to reach liberation. Although it might take a very long time, liberated souls get a place among the gods. Shinto. Something weird about Shinto is that the believers need not confuse that they are Shinto believers in public. According to some old Japanese legends related to Shinto, the dead enter a gloomy underground place called Yomi, where a river separates the dead and the living. The Yomi is a place much like Greek Hades, and the dead and the people here have a negative view of death and corpses. The followers of this religion believe in ancient gods and spirits called kami. Although they believe that some human beings can become kami after they died, according to the Shinto people are naturally pure. They can retain their purity and keep away from evil through some purification rituals. Hinduism. There are approximately 900 million Hindus believe in a supreme god called Brahman, who manifests himself through many other gods and goddesses. Some of the standard practices in Hindu include yoga, devotion to a god, meditation, pilgrimage to holy cities, and several other practices. Hindus do not believe in heaven or hell. Their life after death system of belief is that of reincarnation. Hindus believe that when someone dies, he or she is born into a different body, largely determined by his or her previous life. Hindus believe that human beings are bound to illusion and ignorance, but they can escape it during the rebirth, which their souls realize their true nature. Chinese traditional religion. Almost everyone is familiar with yin and yang, a popular concept that faithful followers of Chinese traditional religion hold strong to, including their mythological deities and gods. The yin is negative, dark, and feminine, while the yang is positive, bright, masculine, and the interaction of two greatly influence the destiny of all things. Those who live according to the Chinese traditional religion believe in peaceful life and after death. Peaceful life after death, one that an individual can attain through performing specific rituals, showing great honor to ancestors upon death. The god Cheng Hang determines whether someone's spirit is virtuous enough to go and dwell with the immortals in the Buddhist paradise, or to a hell followed by an, an immediate rebirth to their next reincarnation. Sikhism. Sikhism is one of the most popular religions in India, with approximately 25 million followers. Guru Nanak founded Sikhism in 15,000 AD, a religion a religion that has grown to the point of having over 500,000 followers living outside of India. According to the beliefs and practices of the Sikhs, a person's actions determine whether his or her soul is destined for great agony and pain in the underworld, or an end merging with God in spiritual world. A soul caught in cycle of reincarnation can overcome it through meditating on seek God, Aka or Encore, overcoming self and becoming a saint's soldier fighting for good. Genshi. Genshi is the newest religion on the list. The ideology behind it makes it a social political organization as well as a religion. Genshi hurt, adults, I don't know, worship Kim the Second Song, North Korea's first dictator, who also rules as internal President Kim the Second Song's son. Kim Jong Lee, who ruled as his father's surrogate, and Kim Jong Sako, and the wife of Kim the Second Song Jin-chi, was fashioned after Christianity. Those people representing that religion Trinity position held by God, the Father, Jesus and Christ and Holy Spirit. In Christianity, Jin-shi followers believe that when they die, they go to be with their dictator president forever. Some of these ones I can't even say, so we go to Islam. Islam. Islam, though very different from Christian practice, Baal and doctrine, shares a bit of its history with Christianity. People believe that the Prophet Muhammad founded Islam in 622 AD in Mecca. Despite growing up in the knowledge of Christian faith practice, regardless of the famous belief that the men who follow closely in the faith will receive 72 virgins and women, just one man for each of them, to do all sorts of things with no on with on the other side. Muslims believe in the place a good place called paradise and a good place called hell. Those bound for paradise will experience peace before the reincarnation, and those bound for hell will suffer in their graves. The Aztecs. When most people think of Aztecs, their religion, the images that come to mind are those of people offering up their children as human sacrifices to appease their gods. This religion has numerous festivals dedicated by the Aztecs calendar, and the people believed in numerous gods and goddesses. The Aztecs believed that when of their own dead, the Aztecs believed that when one of their own dead died, they would enter into any one of the three places they believed was where they would spend their afterlife. Michelin Tai, Locan, or the sun. Women who lost their lives during childbirth and fallen warriors were believed to transform into hummingbirds, and those who drowned were believed to go to Tai Tailocan, and those who died from horrible causes ended up in Mytoglan. Rastafarianism. Rastafarianism is a relatively new religion that is growing very fast, especially among communities that embrace the use of marijuana, and you can identify a faithful by the colors he or she wears and how he or she takes care of their hair. Rastafarians has its roots in Jamaica, and the movement dates back to 1930s. According to this religion, the one emperor of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie, was their god incarnate, a faith that did not shake even when he died in 1975. According to some Rastas, all the believers will experience immortality through the purpose of reincarnation. and they believe in heaven as getting back to the Garden of Eden, which according to them is Africa. Buddhism. According to the Buddhists, life is a journey, whereas death is return to earth. Most of the religions that believe in reincarnation have similar idea of where they believe an individual ends up after his life, despite verifi- slight concerning how someone gets to the next reincarnation or achieve nirvana. According to Buddhism, a Buddha who has attained a state of enlightenment is the only one who gets to enter nirvana, the highest state of perfect peace and the happiness where one's individual suffering and desires do not exist. Those who fail to achieve nirvana are reborn immediately after their death, where they receive another body. Oh yeah, of course Christianity in it. I know Big Philly will be mad. Oh, everyone's here. Sorry, I didn't see you there. I'm busy reading. Um, Christianity. Almost one in every three people in the world is a Christian, a religion that is far more prevent. I don't know. I never can read than any other is on earth on the planet. As such, people are familiar with that Christians believe, especially with regard to life after death. Christians believe that if an individual is born again, when he or she dies, or she will enter an eternal rest called heaven, a place where there will never be any pain, crying, moaning. Being born again is simply a confusion of Jesus Christ's lordship over one's life and a belief in Christ crucifixion, death, and reincarnation. However, according to the book of Revelations, people who refuse to be born again end up in a lake burning with fire and brimstone as an eternal punishment for their rebellion towards God. Well, of course, they had to put Christianity in that. Hi, let me go back to the picture because I like the picture. I like the picture. So, hi everybody. I didn't see you lot there. I'm busy reading. Let me just in case we lose it. Hi, 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 hi. I'm talking about my favorite subject. I love talking about death. Sorry, I'm a bit weird. Yeah, so let me go through who's here. Hi, Saida. Hi, Optimus Prime. Hi, Chrissy. Hi, Nosy. Hi, Just J. So I know there's also an Egyptian one to death as well. Now, now I know this at the top of my head. Now, in the Egyptian thing, for what I can remember, when they die, they go through a process of taking their innards out and storing in a canubit jar, and I think he gets weighed. I think it's Anubis weighs the heart against a feather. It's not Maat, it's Anubis, I think it is. And then you see whether you go to eternal paradise, or you go to eternal damnation. I think that's how it goes. I can't remember. My Egyptian mythology is crazy. So, um, what I'm gonna do, I'm also gonna switch to the next screen. Which one did I read? Oh yeah, read that one. Let me see. So death and the afterlife. So obviously in religions, I know it's all different. People believe in reincarnation, which you will see from these children. There's some children who reincarnated. The youngest one I think is 10 or 15, I can't remember. Then they start remembering stuff from like being a soldier to being a to feeling getting shot, all sorts of things, right? So this article here, which is what I looked at, life, death and the afterlife. So most world religions view death as both an ending and a beginning, an end of life as it is currently known, and the beginning of a new type of existence. Three basic concepts of life after death are heaven and hell. I wonder if it goes through. Oh, it goes okay because we read all the. They've got Buddhism and stuff in there again. Oh, okay, I see what they've done. Heaven and hell. Excuse me. This concept is a characteristic of three major world religions, so Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. According to these systems of belief, each human being lives a single life after death and survives as a disembodied soul. At some future date, the soul is re-embodied and undergo a last judgment by God. After which, let me see with my mic on because I can't see. After which it enjoys eternal physical bliss in heaven or endures eternal physical anguish in hell. Rebirth. The Hindu and Buddhist traditions believe in a process of continuous rebirth or reincarnation until the state of oneness with the ultimate reality is achieved, at which the time of process of rebirth ceases. The circumstances of reincarnation depending on karmatic principles such as the person's actions in previous life. Cosmic spirit. According to many indigenous religions and some New Age beliefs, people return to a cosmic and essential spirit after they die. So that's their uptake on it. But hopefully, I could find my children that I have saved, because that's all part of the death thing, the reincarnation part. See if I got my children. Oh, this is the movies. No, we don't. Movies, do it. No, we don't need the movies. We need the ones with the children. Oh, what is this one? Okay. So I'm gonna play this video right now because you know me, I always have a video for everything. I can't help myself. That's just me. So let's get to it. I'm not gonna go into speech mode because this is all. Some people know the process of the life after death thing already, so you know.
And it was liquid, silvery. There came a time I knew that it was time to come back through the tunnel, and I was there with the body again. I remember hearing a phrase from an Eagles song, "You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave." I thought, that's terribly insensitive. That's awful. And then my next conscious memory was opening my eyes and seeing my family around me.
Tom Harper, theologian, Rhodes Scholar, journalist, and author, encountered this story when he was researching his best-selling book, Life After Death.
Pam Najur is a special case, the exception that both proves and questions the rule. She was measurably dead, clinically unplugged, as it were, and then she came back to tell us about it. So, is it our measuring devices that need adjustment, or our notions about the nature of death and what it means? Good question. When I began the 3 years that it took to research my book, I knew there was no proof either for or against the existence of life after death. It's just as it is in the case with God. I saw my task then to be the assembly of the evidence, all of it, pro and con, to weigh it, and then to come to a rational conclusion based on a careful analysis of it. If you like, a kind of every man and every woman's common sense approach to the question. The one thing I can safely say that we've learned, the foundation stone, the central phenomenon of life after death studies today, is certainly the near-death experience.
Pam Najur is only one of a vast crowd of people who tell of a near-death experience. 42% of Americans report some kind of contact with the dead. Sociologist Reverend Andrew Greeley. 8 million Americans claim to have undergone a near-death experience. PMH Atwater, author of Coming Back to Life. 8 million Americans. And that may well be an understatement, since a great many people are reluctant to talk about their experiences. Even in more skeptical countries, the figures are similar. In England, 66% of nurses reported mystical events brought on by close involvements with people in their dying moments. An Oxford University study. These and other figures indicate a profound acceptance of the possibility of contact with the dead. But what exactly are we talking about? Assuming near-death experiences really happen, can we then make the jump into treating them as genuine, revelatory encounters with the hereafter?
Many people are profoundly transformed by this experience who survive it. Their attitude toward life changes drastically. They become much more appreciative of the privilege of living. They become much more compassionate and loving toward others. They become much more spiritually open, not necessarily more religious after their experience. And one thing that's almost universal among these people is they lose their fear of death and lose it forever as a result of knowing that, from their understanding, there is no death.
The near-death experience. Cast out of yourself, leaving your physical body, passing through unimaginable sounds, light, waves of feeling, overpowering visions of things you never conceived of before, faces of the dead. Are you alive? And if you are, where are you going? How could anyone's life not be changed?
How did I change as a result of my experience? Everything about me changed. Now I'm interested in people. I'm interested in what I can do to help their spirit.
I changed as a human being. In many ways, I was very aggressive. I wanted to make money in that. And I realized the need for the materialism isn't important.
I am determined to seek all the knowledge I can find about anything, and to know God most of all.
You do have a feeling of knowingness with the universe, oneness with the universe, and it's not because you're so special, it's because you wake up to who you truly are.
I had to deal with, acknowledge, and accept that I am a spiritual being. My priority now are personal relations, people, and my personal life. I was in the nightclub business in New York and in Florida. I had very successful nightclubs, and I was in a very hedonistic and materialistic lifestyle. I was partying and drinking champagne and going out with different girls all the time. It was a perfect world that I lived in. Well, I got into an argument with a business associate in my nightclub.
Listen, don't call me a cheat in front of my friends, okay? I think I can call you whatever
we started fighting.
Don't be calling me kid. Bucket face.
And it became quite serious. And I began to strangle him. And I was pulled away by a security guard. And all of a sudden, I heard my heart stop and my breathing stop at the same instant, the same moment. And I knew I was dying. I thought to myself, this is it. This is how it all ends. I was dead. I heard somebody shouting, "We have no vital signs, we're losing him." And at that point, I found myself in an ambulance. I could hear the driver on the two-way radio, and he was telling the hospital that they were on their way with a patient who just coded in the ambulance. I sensed that the ambulance was slowing down, and the driver turned at this fork in the road, and when he accelerated very rapidly, I felt myself being propelled out of the top of the ambulance. And I was hovering maybe 40 or 50 feet above the ground, watching the ambulance going down this dark road. My view was then drawn up toward the sky, and I watched what I sensed to be a massive energy forming in the sky right in front of me, like a black liquid, and it created this tunnel effect, like giant waves, giant ocean waves funneling around. I heard this loud whooshing sound, and then I went up into this tunnel of energy. And as I went up through it, all of a sudden I was enveloped with this bright light, bright golden light, just surrounded me. Then the light became brighter and brighter, and it turned to a pure white light, radiant, beautiful light. And I knew I was in the presence of God.
Ned Doherty felt that presence so strongly that he reformed and turned his life around spiritually, on the spot. But here is what happened to a man, already a minister, who had always assumed he was in the presence of God, but found that it meant something different after his near-death experience.
I was asleep, and I awoke about 3 in the morning with great pain. And then suddenly I was being transported somewhere else. I remember looking back just fleetingly, and I saw my wife asleep in bed and my body there. I was drawn into this bright light, this ever-expanding, swirling tunnel of light. And it was very much a feeling of returning to somewhere where I had been before. It was like a coming home. I don't know. It was not frightening. It was very peaceful and exciting. That's what I remember. I remember the feelings of peace, gentleness, at oneness. And then suddenly, abruptly, I was back in that bed and back in that body. And I remember thinking, oh God, not this again. I was back in this physical body with its limitations. I was also back with my wife and my children and my pet dog and my home and all the persons and things that I enjoy in this life. But I had had a glimpse of something else, and all of that faded into insignificance. And I don't mean to depreciate my family when I say that. But it did. It was no longer significant. None of that.
Ken Martin had a glimpse of something else. Whatever he felt was so immense, so overpowering that it made everything else, his wife, his kids, his calling, appear insignificant.
One striking aspect of the near-death experience is the amazing variety of people who have had them. There are people of all religions and people who don't have any faith at all. Men, women, and children, good people, bad people, rich and poor, weak and strong. In the cases of Ned Doherty and Ken Martin, two quite different men, two quite similar experiences, and finally, two very different conclusions or lessons from them. It's obvious that the near-death experience, however powerful, affects everyone differently. But what does that mean? Does it indicate that the contents of the experience merely reflect the private imagination and are not universal? To put it another way, are they simply based in and confined to each individual's brain?
I've no doubt at all that near-death experiences are profound life-changing events. They feel absolutely real to the people who have them. But underneath that, I think that it's all created by things going on in the brain. And if I want to understand what's happening in a near-death experience, I personally will try to say what's happening in here, not look for some idea of a soul leaving and going somewhere else. So I think it's a real and important experience, but still it's a brain-based experience.
I strongly suspect that the experience of the near-death phenomenon and the conviction that there is an afterlife is tied to the intrinsic wiring of the human brain and a process that emerged evolutionary-wise as the sense of self occurred. Because at the moment the sense of self emerged, if it had believed that it would die, the apprehension would be so significant it would have been fragmenting, and the sense of human self would never have evolved the way it has.
There's plenty of evidence that people do change after NDEs, but a lot of controversy about why. Most people seem to think it's because they've actually met God or they've been to heaven and so on. I don't think so at all. I think the really transforming aspect of an NDE, when it goes far enough for the ordinary sense of self to start to dissolve.
One of the interesting things about the near-death experience is that the conditions bringing it about are associated with hypoxia, and we now realize that certain neurons die. Not all of them. A small subpopulation die, which means that now the brain is microstructurally connected differently. And basically the microstructure of the brain is your personality. These small changes occurring in the appropriate place can produce a change that will last more or less forever, and the person will be and appears transformed.
Well, those views sound perfectly reasonable from a scientific perspective, and yet they don't completely satisfy, I think. They leave some crucial elements out. They don't explain, for example, how a near-death experience can have measurable exterior effects. Take the example of Dr. Yvonne Cason.
Well, in 1979, I was involved in a medical evacuation accompanying a critically ill native Indian woman.
Hi everybody. Hi Big Dog Philly. Hi everybody. Those who just entered. Right, they're just talking about the near-death experience at present right now. I'm hoping they will get to the reincarnation part, but let's see, like where they go with how they look at things.
To a larger hospital. Our airplane flew into a blizzard, and both of the propellers, the air filters froze over, and we crashed onto the surface of a semi-frozen lake.
The patient died, and so did Dr. Cason. But a bright, pure, blissful light enveloped her, took her out of her body, and soothed her. Her time had not come. She was returned to her body, and she survived. The experience changed her in a lot of ways, but one way in particular. She became clairvoyant.
Well, about a month after I had my near-death experience, I was driving home from work to visit a friend. We were going to have supper together. And suddenly, I got a very clear visual image in my head of my friend's brain covered in pus. Now this image to me as a doctor was a very clear visual image of meningitis. So when I got there, I asked my friend Susan, how are you? How are you feeling? And she said to me, gee, Vaughn, I've got a really, really bad headache. I've never had a headache like this. This is one of the worst migraines I ever had. As a doctor, I asked her all the other symptoms of meningitis, and she didn't have any of them. So I said to her, listen, if you develop any of the other symptoms of meningitis, I want you to promise me that you go to the emergency tonight at the hospital and insist on being tested for meningitis. So as it turns out, she did get worse that night. She did go to the emergency of a major hospital here in Toronto. And sure enough, she was confirmed at being at the very early stages of a very rare and often fatal type of meningitis. And because it was diagnosed so early, she survived it without any brain damage, which is very rare for an adult. So this was my first clairvoyant episode.
Dr. Caisson's experience is not unusual in itself. Claims of increased physical sensitivity and mental powers are frequent and controversial after effects of the near-death experience. But remember this, the people we met are representative of literally hundreds of thousands who report similar experiences. They can't all be wrong. Something has happened to these people, and it has to do with the questions we asked earlier. Is the near-death experience indeed confined to the brain only? Or is it the result of non-physical phenomena of the spirit?
I came down and said goodbye to him at 6:25. I remember it distinctly, and he was the happiest kid on earth because he was going to do what he loved to do. And, you know, it was the last moments I saw him alive.
19-year-old Stephen Savin was a bright, active, seemingly healthy kid, a kind of golden boy. And then one morning, in a phys ed class, his heart just quit. He was pronounced dead in a hospital before either his frantic parents could get there. Their shock was crushing and total.
I had never felt so much hurt in all my life, and it's a hurt that you just can't take away. It was almost as if this great big hole was suddenly inside of you. And no matter what, it just wouldn't go away. Before I had gone to bed that night, I was the last one to sort of put all the lights out and go upstairs. And it was a time for me to be with my own feelings. We'd had a house full of people all day, and it was my time, and I just started to talk to Stephen. It was something that I felt that would help me. And I had asked him if there was any way in the world that he could come and say goodbye, because I had not been able to say goodbye to him. And I felt that his father really needed something at this time. With that note, I went to bed, and I went to sleep really quickly because I was exhausted. And then I woke up around 3 o'clock, found that
I got out of bed. It was around 2:30 in the morning. It was quite quiet out, and I remember coming downstairs and doing a lot of thinking and looking at pictures of Stephen and just generally trying to get a handle on what was going on. And then I came back upstairs, and Linda was in bed, and I got in bed with her, and she was awake. And we were lying there, and it was around 3:10 in the morning, and it was very quiet and peaceful. I miss him. Then all of a sudden, I felt something, and I put my hand over my eyes, and I had my eyes wide open.
What?
And I felt, and then I saw a light. And I said to Linda, there's something happening.
What does it look like?
And she said, what was it? And I said, I don't know, but there's just something here. And I saw the light, and I knew it was Stephen. And I don't know how I knew, but Linda was saying, what's he look like? I said, he's a dove, and he's a star, and he's neither one at the same time. He's in and out, and he was pulsing with energy and bright light, and very distinct and real. And Linda said, what's he saying? And I said, he's not saying anything. He's just there in front of me. And I was just transfixed looking at him, and it was beautiful, and I knew it was our son. And all of a sudden, I heard the words, thank you. It came through me. And I knew that Stephen had said goodbye to us. It was the most amazing experience I've ever had in my life. I felt a definite, sudden calm come all over me.
This story was one that Tom Harper, theologian, Rhodes Scholar, journalist, and author, encountered when he had finished writing his bestseller, Life After Death.
The experience of the Savins is both touching and extraordinarily vivid. But perhaps more importantly, I find it completely believable. Neither of them had had any contact with the paranormal before this occurrence. And while it would be wrong to say that they miss Stephen any less now, there's no question that this incident has allowed them to begin to come to terms with his death. An important point to remember when we listen to stories such as those of the Savins is the sheer number of people who report such experiences. The Savins, in fact, are two of literally millions. Bill Guggenheim is a former Wall Street securities analyst who has now become a noted researcher in after-death communications.
Well, these are very common events. We estimate, as an example, that 20% of all Americans and Canadians have had an after-death communication experience, which translates into numbers such as 50 million Americans or 5 million Canadians. And those are very conservative estimates. Yet numbers are probably closer to double those figures. Yet people don't talk about these because when they have them, they often think they're going crazy or losing their mind, especially if they're bereaved at that time. So if they go to share them with somebody else, there's a great deal of skepticism in our Western culture about after-death communications. And yet the irony is that these are very, very common in other parts of the world, such as the Catholic countries of Central America, South America, parts of Europe, in the Middle East, and even the Far East. There would be no reason to do the research or to write a book about this subject because they're just part of the process of living and of grieving and of dying and communicating after death back to the living person.
Marilyn Johnson comes from a long line of native North American shaman and has inherited the gift of soul travel from her late grandfather. The story she is about to tell may give you pause, but the tradition of soul traveling she refers to is practiced by native people and is a process by which she leaves her body in spirit form.
My primary purpose in life is to soul travel, gather information in the physical world, and travel to the land of the dead and obtain information from people's ancestors, and then bring the information back and then help people here. So it's sort of compiling information from two different places and then presenting it as a package of information to those who are still living here.
Marilyn Johnson helps those in the land of the living gain information about themselves through contact with those in the land of the dead. But she can also use this gift to heal those in the land of the dead.
It's about in 1981. There was myself and a few other medicine people here in Toronto received a phone call from a woman in New Mexico. And her and her partner at that time told us that their house was haunted and described a lot of noises, and they could hear like a little girl crying late at night sometimes, and they checked around the house and there was nobody there. So one evening they were out for a walk and it was at sunset and they were just coming home and they saw a little girl in a long dress in the front window of their house. And they were wondering, who is this little girl and why is she by herself? She looked like she was about 5 years old and maybe of native ancestry. She had black hair and dark skin.
Little
Hey.
And she turned around when they called her, and she just looked at them and smiled, and then she walked along the front of the house. And she went about maybe 10 feet and then disappeared right into the house through the wall. So at that point they knew that she wasn't living in this existence, that she was a spirit of some sort. So they were really excited by this and also very afraid, because they just didn't know what to do about it. And they walked closer to the house and looked at the window, and they could see the handprints, a child's handprints on the window. So I went soul traveling over 4 nights, like I usually do, and spoke to the spirit of this little girl. But also the spirit of her mother showed up, and I could see that they were separated. And what had happened is that coming over the knoll of a hill, right near where that house is located now, and the mother fell down the hill and broke her neck. And then the little girl stayed with her mother and then eventually just died of exposure and starvation. And because they had died at separate times, it's like they were spiritually separated. Coming back to the house looking for her mother, because it had all occurred in that location. So I relayed this message back to them, and in the meantime they'd also sent me a photograph of these handprints. So what we advised them to do, and we did as well here, is we had a feast for the two of them so that their spirits could be joined together in the same location in the spirit world, and we wanted them to be together. And once this was done, then the house wasn't haunted anymore.
As the Savins and Marilyn Johnson show, there's no lack of evidence about contact with the beyond. But in the Western world, the world of mainstream science and religion and good old hard-headed common sense, the first tendency is always to scoff at such stories, and particularly if you're a scientist.
I think death is the most profound blow that a person can face. It's a frightening experience, the end of myself or of a loved one. And people want to deny it, so there's a tremendous denial of death. And so there is what I call the transcendental temptation, the yearning of the soul to leap beyond and to communicate with the dead. But again, these are anecdotal reports. They're psychological or subjective accounts. And the question is, people may have thought they saw this, but were they really, are these experiences veridical? Are they true? Or are they merely describing their own internal psychological needs? I think the latter is probably the better explanation.
Not all scientists take as hard a line. Dr. Richard Olson at the University of North Carolina led a team of researchers who conducted a study with widows and widowers after the death of their spouses.
And well over half, about 60-some%, said that they'd experienced the spouse in some way. Some had a sense of presence, some actually spoke with their spouse, some saw them, some felt a physical presence. None had discussed it with their physician. Very few had mentioned it to their family.
I think one of the interesting features we've found is that during conditions of death, specifically to significant others, such as husbands and wives and children, effectively anyone with whom there's bonding, emotional bonding, interior cingulate type bonding, during these conditions, individuals can often, particularly during dream states, particularly during altered states, can experience information at a distance. And we now realize it has something to do with the right hemisphere. and the way the right hemisphere can detect information spatially and how it can respond to emotions. And again, it has to do with bonding. It only seems to work with individuals with whom there's a great deal of emotional bonding.
While scientists like Dr. Persinger explore the communication that occurs between those at the point of death and their loved ones, they still tend not to acknowledge the possibility that the soul continues beyond death. That assumption lies at the heart of parapsychologist Boyce Beatty's work.
I live in Connecticut, and when persons call Yale University or the University of Connecticut and say they have a ghost in their house, they're frightened, they don't know with whom to speak, they're put in contact with me, and then I work with others, usually a deep trance medium or a clairvoyant, sometimes a clinical psychologist and maybe another parapsychologist. We investigate and we eliminate viable alternative explanations. Are the persons somehow disturbed psychologically? Is it squirrels in the attic? And if we cannot find a normal explanation for it, and do find, in fact, that it is a spirit of a deceased human being, then we conduct what is called rescue mediumship, counseling the dead, or soul rescue work, speaking to them, communicating with them, helping them understand they're not in a physical body any longer, and then helping them pass on into the afterlife.
For most people, even those who accept some form of life after death, these assertions can be a little hard to swallow. But Boyce Beatty asks us to approach what he calls rescue mediumship from the other direction, from the results it gets, the many people from whose lives he claims to have removed inexplicable disruptions. People such as Bill and Laurie McCauley.
I said to Laurie, it's coming back after me. Whatever this is, it's coming back after me again. And I was petrified. Just sweat was just pouring off of me. And all of a sudden I felt something on my back. Not physically on my back, but I knew something was on me.
We moved in the house in 1985. And shortly after that, things would happen sporadically in the house. Lights would come on and off with an unexplained nature. We'd hear voices in our house other than our own, children laughing and crying other than our own. Objects would move before our eyes. And this was very sporadic. Nothing that really pointed out to us that definitely our house was haunted.
I kept pushing these things to the back of my mind. No, this couldn't be happening. This couldn't be happening. It's got to be of a human nature. It's got to be a neighborhood child or a neighborhood teenager, or somebody was harassing my wife. Until one evening I was working second shift and I had come home from work and everybody was asleep. And I took the dog out in the backyard and all of a sudden this light came out of the ground. It was about 6 feet long by about 3 feet wide. It just came right out of the grass. And my dog walked over to the edge of it and showed his teeth and started growling ferociously at it. So I grabbed the dog and we went back in the house. And as I locked up the house, my son started having a nightmare, one of many nightmares, upstairs in his bedroom. So I woke him up and brought him downstairs and put him into my wife's, into our bed. So I went upstairs, undressed, and I got into Jeffrey's bed. And then as I lay down, I felt a presence for the very first time over the dresser, looking down at me. And I sat up. It's black, no, the room is dark, but I knew something was there looking at me, and the only thing I could feel, I was not so much frightened as I felt as though it was confused. It was trying to figure out why was I in this bed and not Jeffrey.
At first he was my friend in the beginning, but then at the end I was listening to my parents a lot and he'd try and scare me until one night he was really bugging me and a lot of havoc was going on in our bedroom.
We were sleeping together in the same bed. And there was that one occurrence when he came out of the closet and was scaring us, and he just pulled the covers off us, and he was just scaring my brother and me.
And that's when I concluded for the very first time that there was a haunting or a ghost or some type of entity in our home affecting my family.
Upon reading an article about Boyce Beatty in the newspaper The Hartford Courant, Bill Macaulay contacted him. Boyce determined that the family was indeed troubled by a legitimate haunting before prescribing a remedy.
What finally worked in our case was the mild exorcism in the home, and Boyce Beatty did a prayer for the dead, which helped pass over the earthbound spirits that were left in our home.
Recognizing that in many of these cases it's a matter of helping people go into the light, recognizing that in many of these kind of cases what is happening is that it is the spirit of a deceased human being who is earthbound, who is quite confused, not realizing they are no longer functioning in a physical human body, and have not passed into the afterlife, into the light. So that night I did a prayer that was oriented toward communicating with the spirits of any deceased human beings who had not gone into the light, who were earthbound.
As a result of their experience, the Macaulays have pioneered a self-help group, Victims of Paranormal Phenomena.
Some Buddhists believe that if we don't get to the light after we die, we will remain sorrowfully earthbound, unable to find our ways through the bardo and into our next reincarnation. Other cultures maintain similar concepts expressed in their own terms. The testimony of the Savins, Marilyn Johnson, and the Macaulays points to the possibility that consciousness can have existence beyond physical death.
They thought Jessie Lott had a bad cold until her liver began to fail. She went into a coma, her brain pressure reached 100, and her heart stopped. For 20 minutes, she was gone. And then, she came back. An ordinary emergency, really. Except for one thing.
When my heart stopped, I just suddenly saw my grandma, and she passed away like a year ago.
What did she look like?
Well, she had like a white robe on, and she looked exactly how she did before she died.
I've interviewed dozens and dozens and dozens of children who have had these experiences.
Pediatrician Dr. Melvin Morse of the Seattle Children's Hospital has conducted by far the most in-depth research into children's near-death experiences. His documentation includes extensive on-camera interviews with children, such as Jessie Lott.
And what did you think about that, your grandma being there?
I was just so shocked. I didn't, I don't know. Just like she was right there, and I was right here, and I can't move. She was just sitting there. It's like she was frozen. I was sort of scared, but sort of happy to see her. That's all I remember. That she was sitting in a chair. She was sitting frozen, and she was fine. I don't know where I went, but I went somewhere.
She's just a kid with no axe to grind, no knowledge of the concept of the near-death experience. In her case, hardly any religion in her upbringing at all. Just a kid who remembers what she experienced. Hers is just one of the stories Tom Harper, Rhodes Scholar, theologian, and journalist, encountered when he was researching his bestseller, Life After Death.
Just a kid. But to children, and particularly those who have had no special indoctrination in religious ideas, have something unique to tell us about what happens after death. Are their experiences different? Or do they have the same experiences as adults, but see them differently? Are they better reporters because of their lack of sophistication? In this program, we will look at many examples of children's testimony.
Children have simple and pure experiences. They use words like neat or weird, which are very, very real feelings. That the typical child's near-death experience, they go, "Wow, I thought I was floating out of my body, and I knew I was dead, but I was still alive." And there's a genuine quality of mystery about it. How could such a thing be really happening to them? They're often frightened by the experience. Many of them wonder how they're going to get back in their body. Since it's so far out of the realm of anything they expected, they frequently say it was scary. That's not an unusual experience at all. And mostly I'm impressed by how fragmentary the experiences are. They usually just tell a teeny little fragment of something that has clearly struck them.
Because the huge noodle was just like a tunnel. It went straight, and it didn't have anything in your way. It wasn't like a spiral noodle, so it's either a tunnel or a noodle, and it was a rainbow.
A horrendous crash on a snowy mountain bridge plunged 3-year-old Chris Eggleston into a freezing lake.
Was that scary?
Yeah, and our mom yelled to take our seatbelts off. But when we crashed, behind us was a car with 6 children in it. He was the person who saved my life, who saw us go around the curve, but when he came around the curve, he didn't see us anymore. So he took his flashlight and looked down off the bridge, and he could see us, could see our car. So he had to dive like 5 or 6 times to get down far enough to get to it. And during all that time, I was having a near-death experience.
Chris Eggleston had, again, a typical child's near-death experience, in the sense that it's brief, fragmentary, difficult to comprehend, both for us and for him.
I started falling through this noodle, and it was coming closer and closer. And I went inside it, and it was all like a rainbow. And then at the end, there was a wall with smaller, just 2 smaller tunnels that would lead to like an animal heaven or him.
And he was in a car which filled up with water, and he nearly drowned. He said suddenly everything went blank. He was then out of his body, surprised to be there, felt that eventually he could learn to swim or somehow move himself in the air. Said that he went to a place that he called the human heaven and made some sort of choice to return to his body. But interestingly enough, he says that he was in a huge noodle until he realized that noodles don't have rainbows in them, so it must have been some sort of tunnel.
Children's experiences have the common features of tunnels, lights, out-of-body experiences, all of which I think we can understand in brain terms. What they don't have is elaborated visions of the kind that adults have. They do not have long life reviews. They haven't had a long life. Quite often they see living people as well as dead ones. They see their pets. They see the people who matter to them in a different way from adults. We also mustn't forget that many children, particularly in America where most of these stories come from, are exposed to a lot of religious propaganda early in their life. They hear about heaven and hell and pearly gates and angels and so on. And in fact, some of the angels children report are classic sort of painted angels that you might get in a religious shop, wings and halos and the whole works. So I think a lot of the details come from children's expectations, just as they do with adults.
And then I didn't know which was which, so I started floating down the ones the camera was. Then I ran into this humongous flower. And then inside I found a honeybee that was like as big as I was now. Like, I knew he liked me because he gave me some bread.
His parents had no religious beliefs whatsoever. He doesn't encounter something that he thought was God. His heaven is a very commonplace description of heaven in that it was a golden castle with pearly gates, the kind of thing that I think virtually every child is exposed to. He says he had a bumblebee as a helper that assisted him with the experience. In other words, I think a more religious child typically describes guardian angels as assisting them with the experience. In his case, it was a bumblebee, a very non-religious image in keeping with his very non-religious background. The one message I've learned from children's near-death experiences is that we die the life we live.
So, it seems we die the life we live. The same images that are comforting to you in life are comforting in death.
How did that make you feel?
I was sort of scared, but sort of happy to see her.
You were happy to see her. And then what happened?
One of the most interesting things about watching the interview with Jessie Lott is the fragmentary nature of her experience. She's obviously struggling with something very profound that's happened to her, and yet she herself doesn't understand it. She has a long memory gap to the very moment her heart stopped beating. And that's when she had the image that her grandmother was sitting there at the bedside. I was just so shocked to see her. She has the sensation she went somewhere else, and then she was back. And then following this tiny little memory, which is localized to the point of her near death, she then has another long memory gap. She doesn't tell us a coherent story. She doesn't fill in every memory gap. She doesn't have a logical or rational explanation for the puzzling things that happened to her. Instead, she simply tells us what she saw and how profoundly affected she was by it.
I think it's fair to say that children identify more with natural phenomena than adults do. Where, for example, an adult might typically see religious symbols during a near-death experience, children very frequently encounter animals. Chris Eggleston's honeybee, for example. In addition, children themselves are often identified with small creatures, such as the monarch butterfly in the following story. The monarch is an ancient symbol for early death, probably because its metamorphoses can be seen as symbolic transitions to another life.
Yeah, that's the true thing, because when my neighbour transitioned, there was loads of butterflies, and it means that how someone is leaving or dying at the time of death, or someone, or there is an angel around, or something like that. That's what it means. I can't remember exactly verbatim what it means, but my neighbor, before he died, there was loads of butterflies in the garden, like couple of them. And then I saw this man walking across dressed in the same clothes that he would normally be dressed in, the plaid, the big belly, because he's Ghanaian. And he was walking from one end of the garden to the other. So butterflies is very important. Also crows as well, because before my stepson departed, and I think my uncle, I was walking and two crows were sitting down on the fence, right? So to me, they're messengers. They're messengers of death. So anyone passing, they are the ones who will give you the message that there's a passing about to happen, or something's about to happen. So so um so I've had that as well. So the butterflies that I always see are the white butterflies, always a white butterfly. They talk about the monarch one, but these ones are white, very light, because being it's the garden as well, it's the way they were flying. And since the neighbor died, I haven't seen the butterflies like that. The only time we see the butterflies is when someone is literally passing, literally. Right, because there's no flowers in my garden to say, well, there's flowers there. There's no flowers. So yeah.
But here's a man for whom the symbol became real.
My daughter's computer name was Panda, and she would get on the computer and communicate with friends. And so even before she died, one of my head covers in golf was a panda. And so I'd always think of Jenny when I played golf and would take that cover off. The first monarch experience for me was a Sunday afternoon in August, and beautiful in Omaha, and gathered my 3-wood out in the fairway, and the head cover was the panda, thinking about Jenny, and looked down to my ball, and there's a monarch sitting on the ball. And that monarch just sat there, and I said, there's no way I'm going to hit that ball.
Try and get out there. Get out there.
So after several minutes, finally the monarch very gently and kind of spiraled up and went away, and I felt very warm about it, told my wife, and within a couple of weeks some more began to happen. I was
Yeah, I can concur with you too, JJ, because I mean, I haven't had a outer body, but I've had somebody hands over me doing Reiki, like all the way from America. Astro projection, which is another subject. Astro projection. Now, as for the near-death experience, I've had a few of them, which I've spoken about on my channel before. Like, I mean, they talk about seeing tunnels and stuff like that. I mean, everything sounds like tunnels, right? It's like it sounds like a tunnel, like you're in a tunnel, right? Because when you're hearing the people working on you and all that stuff, so it's like right at first it goes quiet, and then all of a sudden, right, you start hearing things again. So I think sunset, sunset. Um, I've had things like that happen to me. I've had things like this happen to me all my life. I just saw a spirit just the other day. Yeah, when you see them, you're supposed to try and find out why they appear to you. You know, you don't you don't take it for something, because if it's a relative comes to to warn you, like if something's going on with you, the relative will come in your dream, either in your dream or they'll come in your face somehow or the other. They either stand at the back of you, the side of you, which has happened to me. Um, like in this house particularly, I'll give it a great example. There used to be loads of children spirits all around this house. So like you'll either feel them standing beside you, then in the hallway, there'll be people standing in the hallway. So you have to ask, um, are you a good spirit? Are you a bad spirit? What are you doing here? And if it's a bad one, well, obviously you have to get rid of it. If it's a good one, then obviously that one's there to obviously guard you, look over you, take care of you. But see, that's why people, um, and yeah, and yeah, there is indigo seeds. I think I told you you were indigo seed already. I've had several outer body experience. Yeah, this it's interesting. The outer body experiences. Yeah, tunnels are like portals. Yeah, that's what it feels. It feels like you're in a tunnel, literally going through a tunnel. It's like you're hearing muffled talking on the side of you. So, so how that lady described her near death experience while under surgery, like a pulling sensation. It's not impossible, you know. It's not impossible. High truth matter. Have I covered everybody? Let me see. Yes. Miss Wise. Yes, the butterfly monarch I have experienced when my bro died, and oh, but the biological one. Oh, pediological. My bad reading. Okay. Now he was young. Oh, okay. Oh, I mean you're biological, and biological now. You're he was young. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, them butterflies are very, very they're good indications of stuff happening as well. Let me see what Nosy saying. I've had an outer body experience as well. I would love to know how I did it. So there's no explanation for it. There's no how it's done. It just happens. It happens to you, innit? You could be doing anything, and it could be a hit, a knock, even when you're sleeping. It's like you don't want to return to living world. You want to stay in that world. The pull is the magnet, aka the source. Yeah, I feel it's that as well. I feel it's that. Hi, Big O. I did say hi to you, Truth Master Dre already, innit? I know I didn't. Okay, and I can, I can sense whether they are good or bad. Oh, you can sense it. I can control my dreams. Oh, okay, so yes. Because in your dreams you can control it. It's good that you can sense them. Determined by your frequency, aka energy, determines your next destination. Yes, and that is all. Welcome back, Saida. Saida! Oh, Bronze. Hello, Bronze. Saida, can you write me up a disclaimer? Because I should have done it at the beginning because of the surgery part. I know they're going to try to say it's a medical thing. I heard a buzz when I got out of my body shell. Yeah, yes. Definitely agree with you there. But definitely there is a pulling. There is definitely some type of pulling that happens. Hi, Bronze and Saida. I think I got everybody. Okay.
Was talking to a new next door neighbor, and he asked me, how many children do you have? And I'm always reluctant, do I say three, including Jenny, or two, just the living? And I said three. And so he asked me questions. He says, I know a little bit about that and what happened. So I told him, and then I began to relate the butterfly stories, three of which had already happened at that point.
Take my hat off and I'm shushing it away. Thing just doesn't want to go away. And
as I'm talking about Jenny, as I'm talking about deathbed visions and so on, a monarch comes and there's a twig there and sits there. And he's doing this double take, looking at me and looking at the monarch, and it sits there what seems like 6 to 7 minutes. And so for me, I don't know what they prove or whatever, other than I take them for what they are, and that somehow my daughter is still in my life.
Somehow his daughter is still in his life. But in what sense? Is she in some way present in the butterfly? Or do we really mean in his memory? Does this have something to teach us about what happens after death? Certainly many parents think so, and then there are the students and the researchers in the field of children and dying who frequently encounter stories of deceased children who come back to help their loved ones.
I interviewed a man who had a little girl who had spent 18 months dying of neuroblastoma, and she got through multiple remissions.
How was your day?
Okay.
Did anybody come to visit?
No.
No? Can I get you anything?
No. Dad?
Yeah?
No, I've saved
One day,
3 times.
she and her father were talking, and she was very concerned about what was going to happen.
I'm going to try and get all your comments, okay? So, I was 19, I had a fight, and I could see myself fighting. I was above myself watching it happen. So, It happened so quickly. Yeah, that was an outer body one, Nosy. Definitely. That's an outer body situation there. And I see a seer. There's a seer. I am a seer, and I have several gifts of the spirit. My mom has always told me I was a gifted child. Yes, it's good to have seers in the family. That's important. I believe the spirit can come through the butterfly and airways. Yeah, they come through frequencies, waves. Um, they can be in a room and you'll know they're there. Even when you're elsewhere, you can feel the spirit bodies, as I call them. Oh, thank you, Nosy, because I need a disclaimer. Oh, King Higher Self. Oh, everybody's coming through. Higher King Higher Self.
And she said, Daddy, do you know why I've got better 3 times? He said, no, honey, why? She said, because I have to prepare you for my death. And when I feel you're ready, then I'll die. And the day she died, she put her arms around her daddy's neck and said, Daddy, you got to promise you won't do anything to hurt yourself. And he promised. But yet the pain and the anguish so great. 3 days later, he was seriously thinking of killing himself. But he heard her distinctly say,
Daddy, remember, you promised.
and he said, even though the pain was bad after that, I never seriously contemplated committing suicide again.
A hallucination? Maybe. But when people die, there's always an inexplicable aura around them, and never is that phenomenon more deeply felt than when a child dies. The feeling may come from the child, but it encompasses all the people close at hand. There's no end of credible anecdotal evidence to this effect. But Emily Dickinson puts it as clearly as anyone ever has.
The last night that she lived, it was a common night, except the dying. This to us made nature different. We noticed smallest things, things o'erlooked before, by this great light upon our minds, italicized, as 'twere.
You know, something that Dr. Morse has learned from his research is that children don't see death as something to be feared.
I'm curious, one child said to me, I'm not afraid to die anymore. What's the message that people who've had these experiences, that they tell us again and again? I'm no longer afraid to die.
Sometimes children carry their indifference to death to extremes, appearing notoriously casual, not to say callous about the whole idea. After all, they can't really conceive of its meaning, and certainly not to its happening to them.
Miss Lucy had a baby, she named it Tiny Tim. She put it in the bathtub to see if it could swim. It drank up all the water, it ate up all the soap. It died the very next morning with bubbles in its throat. Miss Lucy had a baby, she named it Tiny Tim. Put it in the bathtub to see if it could swim. It drank up all the water, it ate up all the soap. Tried to use the bathtub, but it wouldn't go down slow. Miss Lucy had a baby.
But children not only have near-death experiences, they die too. And there's plenty of evidence that they tend to approach their deaths differently than adults. They are often less frightened and more concerned with the effects on their loved ones. Tanya Caruana had been battling leukemia for close to 3 years when her parents had to break the news to her that she wasn't going to get any better.
When her cancer did come back, it was devastating. And that to think that your child is going to die and you're never going to see that child again. Tanya became very quiet, very withdrawn at that point. I knew that I couldn't wait any longer, that I had to confirm to her that yes, there's nothing more that could be done. And that was a very difficult thing as a mother to do, to look your 13-year-old child in the face and tell them there's nothing more that can be done for them. Shortly afterwards, I went down to take a break and have a really good cry for myself. And when I came back up, she wasn't in her room. And I found her in a little 5-year-old boy's room, telling him how important it is that he takes his medication, because he was having a lot of problems taking his medication. And I thought, here's this child that just found out that she's dying, and here she is trying to help somebody else.
When children are dying of an illness, it's a devastating event for parents, obviously, and siblings. But if the parent can make themselves receptive to the child really truly sharing their experience, rather than continue to be rooted in the physical losses and changes, and that's a very hard thing to do. Anticipating the loss of a child it's one of life's most devastating things. But you have this little child, this little spirit that is having some very wonderful experiences.
She was very weak, and you could see her just trying to lift her arms. And at first, we couldn't figure out what she was trying to do. And then we realized through her whispers that she was trying to hug us. So we both took an arm. My husband took an arm, and I took on an arm, and I was laying on the bed beside her. And I put my other arm around her, and I was just holding her. And she kept saying over and over again, "I love you, I love you." She knew that her time had come.
If the parents can be more receptive to where the child truly is, not so much where the child's body is, it's a big distinction, they will get some very comforting messages that this child is not alone, this child is going on a wonderful adventure, this child is not afraid, this child is not suffering. These are all things that will give them tremendous grief assistance in the journey that they have up ahead. A tremendous amount of peace.
Actually, the 10 minutes before she was dying, at the very end, her breaths got quieter and quieter, and she stopped breathing. And at that point, I started crying, and she started breathing again. It was like she was trying to make herself go on for my sake. And I told her, I said, "No, Tanya, no, it's okay, it's okay." And at that point, she stopped breathing, and then that was it for her.
Tanya's love for her family and her lack of fear in the face of her impending death taught everyone around her a profound lesson in courage. The stories of children who have had near-death experiences and what those who were close to children who have died tell us confirms to me my sense that they're nearer to the womb of creation. And perhaps, in some sense, they're privy to a clearer and purer perception of what's happening to them. As Maggie Callanan tells us, if we can get beyond the grief and the pain we feel as a child close to us is dying, we might hear them telling us something very important about the journey they see ahead, that it's an adventure, that they're not afraid, and that we shouldn't be either.
This was dreamt by a dying woman in her hospital room. A lit candle suddenly appears on her windowsill. The candle goes out. A terrifying, suffocating, miasmic blackness envelops everything. Then, the candle relights, but on the other side of the closed window. The woman died shortly after relating the dream we've just seen to a nurse. Tom Harper, theologian, Rhodes Scholar, journalist, and author, encountered this story when he was researching his best-selling book, Life After Death.
Well, what are we to make of it? What did the dream mean? It must have been significant because, after all, this was the last dream she ever had. The final manifestation of her unconscious mind in this world. According to the celebrated psychiatrist and dream analyst Dr. Marie-Louise von Franz, and based upon her analysis of over 10,000 dreams of the dying, the meaning being communicated is that the light of the individual, one of those common metaphors for life that we've seen so often, goes out at death but is miraculously renewed on the other side. In other words, the spirit seems to live on. This dream, then, illustrates perfectly a profound insight of the great psychoanalyst and the mentor of Dr. von Franz, Carl Jung.
The unconscious psyche believes in a life after death. According to Jung, dream symbols which exist in the very depths of the soul behave as if the psychic life of the individual will continue. In Dr. von Franz's words, these symbols depict the end of bodily life and the explicit continuation of psychic life after death. In other words, our last dreams prepare us for death, and possibly a life beyond death.
You know, it's not only adults who have experienced preparation dreams. Children have reported them too. Here's a particularly telling example. And what's especially interesting and moving is the clarity with which a little boy sees an impending life on the other side. Corey Beller had cancer. Kimberly Clark Sharp spoke to him and to his mother Shirley about his dreams, in which he traveled to a heavenly place called Summerland. Corey even painted a picture of Summerland.
He would cross a rainbow bridge in each dream and go to a place that was so pleasant and wonderful that he called it Summerland. And there was a crystal castle there, and increasingly there were other children there that he knew from his cancer treatment. He loved Summerland, and he spent more and more time in these dreams going there until he felt like his family was in an emotional position to accept his decision to go to Summerland permanently. And with a great deal of matter-of-factness, he announced this to his physicians, and this was at Children's Hospital here in Seattle. His physicians supported his no-treatment decision. He had already had 7 rounds of chemotherapy of like months-long chemotherapy. This little kid had suffered beyond endurance. And he didn't want any more. He wanted to go to Summerland. So he said, hey, docs, I'm ready to die. I'm not going to have any more treatment. They said, okay. Send him home, and he died in his mother's arms on Mother's Day.
Because he had central nervous system disease in his brain and in the lining and the fluid around his brain, he had a lot of sort of flailing and kind of spastic movements. But he did this Lamaze-type breathing all the way through, and he was coherent the entire time and kept trying to have conversations with my friend Shirley, who was with us, and I. And she was as fascinated, I think, as I was, and neither one of us had ever been with anybody who was dying, you know, going through that whole dying process. And he had no fear, absolutely none. He saw Summerland as a real place, not as a dream or a vision. To him, it was a real destination, and one where he knew that everybody who dies would go there at some point, and that that's where he would be reunited with us someday when we die.
Corey Beller showed us that dying children dream in a pure and often unexamined context. But dying adults often look for meaning in the dreams of their final days. Do these dreams provide an insight into what awaits them after death? This is Casey House, a hospice for terminally ill AIDS patients in Toronto, Canada. It is probable that every patient here will have died long before this program is seen. That is no secret, least of all from their own unconscious minds. Yves Benoit, a 37-year-old playwright and artist, talked to us about his dreams and how he interpreted them.
The universe is the sea. The sea represents, I have dreams about the sea. Or in Manitoba with the endless fields. Or those mountains that are so huge, you know, and so beautiful. Or the Cape Breton with the waves of water coming, you know, and crashing against. Dying is to be part again of the universe without having to compromise or without having to work for it, you know. There is this sense that they have the power to make your life change like that, you know. But when you die, it's like the elements become your friends, or they have seduced you. Anyway, I don't know if they are your friends or your enemies, but one thing for sure, you're going back to them.
Eve rejoined the elements in his dreams 2 weeks after he spoke with us. Douglas Graydon, the chaplain at Casey House, has seen a great many like Eve and listened to them describe their dreams.
I think it's taught me that the dying process is a lot more gentle than I presumed it to be. I know there's an awful lot of debate as to whether or not the human body physiologically is releasing hormones or other forms of substances within itself to deaden the pain of approaching death. I'm uncertain as to whether I buy into that totally, if I can phrase it that way. But it's taught me that the dying process can be a very gentle one, can be a very welcoming one, cannot be a frightening process for people, and that it's also something that generally people who are watching the death, if they're listening to the dreams well enough, there's the challenge, that we don't need to be frightened by the death that we're witnessing either. The dreams that I listen to are dreams that tell me that death can be a very reassuring process.
Right, let's take a little bit of a break because it's a lot to take in that documentary. So we're gonna have a little break for a little bit, and then we get back to it. Drink your water if you have water near you. Drink your water. Take a breath, and because it's a lot, that's a lot of people probably might be triggered by all this stuff, especially the ones who's had deaths recently. So just take time with yourself and take a breath, and then we'll start listening again. Okay, right, we're gonna start listening again. So please have your waters with you, or if you have beverages, even that. But Ideally, water is better to be drinking long about this time because a lot of people will be triggered by all the stories that they're talking about, especially if they have been through these people passing with cancer, etc. You know what I mean? So we have to take all that into account. Okay.
The question make me laugh. If I believe in life after death, it's of course I believe in life after death. Like I believe in the wind and I believe in the sun. Of course I believe in life after death.
Bruce Bynum, an American researcher, has spent much of his professional life studying the many aspects of dream life, including what happens as death approaches.
Most cultures have a very rich and diverse way of indicating that death is on its way. Death is inescapable. Nothing can live that will not eventually turn to death. So one's religion, one's culture, one's personal experience profoundly influences the exact content of the symbolism. The symbolization process is a universal process, but the contents of the symbol are different. If you are a Roman Catholic, you may have a certain series of symbols or images come to you. If you are a Buddhist, you may have a different set of images come to you. If you are Hindu, if you are Islamic or whatever. But the symbolization process and the psyche's attempt to come to terms with it, that's a pretty universal phenomenon. And again, the body and the mind begin to not go their separate ways, but the psyche begins to separate somewhat from the physical body and turn its attention toward the deeper regions of its own soul, its own psyche, if you will. There are definite common symbols, particularly in the West, about one's own death. Common ones are one about to take a long trip, a long journey. Another common one is one's final curtain call, if you will. Another one is images of burial grounds. So there are many, many, many very common ones, and you could call them archetypal if you want, but they're very common. You would find a different set of ones if you were in India and a different set of ones if you were in Japan. So culture influences profoundly the content of symbols, but the symbolization process is universal.
Sometimes the symbol of impending death can be entirely personal, perhaps only a sound. I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. With blue, uncertain, stumbling buzz between the light and me. And then the windows failed, and then I could not see to see.
But whether the symbols are traditional or personal, the basic question arises, is this real information in symbolic form? Are we truly being informed about what to expect?
Maggie Callanan is a palliative care nurse and co-founder of Shades of the Rainbow, a workshop whose aim it is to reframe our approach to dying.
We really use dreams in two pretty distinct ways in hospice. First of all, I think it's an important type of communication if our patients are dreaming, to ask them to talk about the dream. If dreams recur, if there's a pattern to their recurrence, the same dream over and over again. Some dreams may have a theme that builds. I remember one woman who lived very much alone, and her cat was her real important person, or the thing that she loved most in life. And the cat, she had had the cat put to sleep just some weeks prior to her own death. And in her dream, she could see the cat down the tunnel. And she would squint and look, and she wasn't sure about the shape. And the dreams were sequential, and as time went by, then she was sure it was the cat, and it was coming closer and closer and closer. And I remember saying to the nurses, she will probably die when that cat comes. We had a volunteer sitting with her so that she wouldn't be alone, and the volunteer came out and said, look, she's waving, but she was going like this, and she was stroking the cat. So that was a good tip-off to us that there was this process going on with her.
A cat, a fly, a stopped clock, another person. Anything and anyone appearing in a dream can be the bearer of the ultimate tidings.
The experience I've had with people actually who have dreamt about their impending deaths predates my involvement with near-death experiences. First time that I can remember anyway encountering this phenomena was an old gent who was on the medical intensive care unit at Harborview, who had a dream that he was going to die at around 2 p.m. that Sunday afternoon. This was on a Friday.
Jim. Yo. How are you?
And in his dream, his brother, who was deceased, had come to tell him this.
2 o'clock on Sunday, you're going to be with me. 2 o'clock on Sunday, you're going to be with me. 2 o'clock on Sunday, you're going to be with me. 2 o'clock on Sunday, you're going to be with me.
So he asked if I would please come to say goodbye to him Sunday morning. Well, you know, so sure, I was going to come in only to assure him that he wasn't going to die. He, in fact, spent that interim time getting better, getting better, getting better.
Jim? 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 Code Blue 104.
And that Sunday, around 2 o'clock, he went into cardiac arrest, and nobody could get him out. Nobody. And he died. And I was comforted by the fact that I knew his brother had come for him again.
2 o'clock on Sunday, you're going to be with me.
Over the years, Maggie Callanan has come as close to understanding the process of dying as anyone could. Some of her conclusions may surprise you, especially her sense of how dying people organize their deaths, for want of a better word.
The way I describe it to my families is it's almost like your dying father has a foot in two worlds, and he has the ability to shift back and forth between the two worlds. When I worked in the hospitals, I was never surprised to hear somebody seriously ill say, I want to go home, I want to go home. That made sense to me. But wasn't I surprised when I started working in patients' homes that patients were saying, I want to go home? Then you have to say, wait a minute, what are we talking about here? And patients saying very clearly to my families, I have to go home now. It's time for me to go. A lot of this kind of symbolic language about taking a trip, seeing a place that no one else can see, being aware of people that no one else can see, oftentimes dead relatives, people who have predeceased the person, or sometimes a spiritual being. Dying patients frequently know exactly when they're going to die, even if no one has told them that they're dying. Now, they cannot stop the process, but they can delay or speed the process up when all around them is in the right place. Most people are aware that a grandmother can wait until her favorite grandson travels across the country to say goodbye. But what people overlook is the dying person who sends the family away, perhaps in a hospital, go home and rest, you're tired, I'm doing better. And the family gets home and a half an hour later the nurse calls and says he's gone. That family is left with a legacy of guilt that is destructive and wounding, when in fact it was the last loving act that he actually chose to spare the people he cared the most about. Dying children very prevalently send their parents away. It's almost as though the pain of having them present when they die is too much, that they can't be freed to go on to this journey that they really want to go on to when they see the pain of loss in their parents' faces. This is very important for people to know ahead of time. Because otherwise they carry a legacy of guilt with them for years. How could I have gone to sleep? How could I have left? How could I have had dinner in the cafeteria? And they feel terrible anguish over that.
The really important point about dreams that struck me as I was researching this particular aspect of evidence for life after death was that the unconscious, using archetypal images, encounters very squarely the fact that the body is facing its own dissolution, that death is real. At the same time, the psyche also seems to be telling us with very rich and universal imagery that it has a deep-seated belief that life or consciousness somehow goes on at the end. I found this even more telling than the evidence of the near-death experience. In our culture, dreams may be the best medium to inform us about the journey we might undertake. In others, as Bruce Bynum now explains, meditation and contemplation are the keys to furthering this process of understanding.
Most other cultures have a very rich, diverse history of working with people who are dying. In the West African traditions, sometimes ceremonies are held. In the Hindu tradition, one turns away from the external life and focuses much more internally. Most cultures have a tradition of this. The only cultures in the world who don't have a tradition of this, unfortunately, are the West. And we've sort of lost a little bit of our way in that area. While pursuing other things, we've sort of lost the art of dying. And the art of dying is complementary to the art of living. Both are involved with transformation. Both are involved with wisdom. There's a lot to be learned in the process of dying. You don't want to sleep through your own death.
It's hard to get people to believe that it wasn't a suicide attempt.
Pat Young was in despair that she would ever be able to resolve the difficulties in her marriage. And so she shot herself and went to hell.
I knew it had to be something that would be drastic enough to put me in the hospital, but not drastic enough to kill me. So I didn't do my torso because I didn't want to do any serious damage. So I thought if it went in one side of my neck and out the other side, that would be bad enough to put me there, not bad enough to keep me there. I had no idea I would die. I was in a coma for 3 days on life support. They were positive I wasn't going to live. They had informed the family that they had lost too much blood. It started out with these little beings, child-sized creatures, grotesque, absolutely grotesque little creatures. And they took great delight in doing things. They would make holes in me. They would either shoot me or they would make holes by actually hitting me. And in these holes, they would put horrible things. Anything that was excrement, vomit, bile, anything that was absolutely obnoxious. And these holes were everywhere. They would put them in my body, in my arm, in my cheek, in my eye socket. And you can't do anything. And you're extremely ill from it. But you can't get sick. I wasn't able to even gag. And you can't feel the pain, but you can feel and you can smell. And just beyond my right shoulder, I could hear this very heavy, raspy breathing, and it was getting closer. And I couldn't turn to see, and I didn't want to see. But I knew that as soon as it got within my range of view, that what I had gone through up till then was absolutely nothing. It was absolute pure evil of some sort that was coming. And at the very last second, when I knew the very next instant it would be within my range of view, I opened my eyes and I was alive.
Tom Harper, Rhodes Scholar, theologian, and journalist, found when he was researching his book Life After Death that most people who have undergone near-death experiences claim to have at least started on the path to heaven. But there are others for whom the experience turned intensely negative. Hellish, in other words.
Not long ago, my wife and I attended a church service in which the preacher declared in no uncertain terms that only those born again in Jesus would be spared eternal damnation. Afterwards, I told him I thought he had a rather narrow view of heaven and hell. "I do indeed, brother," he thundered at me. "I do indeed." It was obvious he felt we were headed in different directions.
Maurice Rawlings, a cardiologist in Knoxville, Tennessee, has been on the front line in operating rooms where he has seen numerous people die and revive. He says we are not hearing about negative near-death experiences because no one wants to admit they've been to hell and back.
Unless you're on the floor with the patient resuscitating, at the time, the heat of battle, at the time of their experience, why are you fighting me off, John? What do you see? Is there fire down there? Is the devil there? What's there? Then it all comes out. It's not sublimated into painless portions of the memory. You've caught them red-handed. They can't deny it. It's there. The negative experiences are always been there. They just haven't been captured because the psychologists, psychiatrists that interview these patients for a living, collecting cases of after-death experiences, haven't resuscitated one of the individuals they're reporting. How is somebody going to report a negative experience when they won't even tell their family? It's an F on the report card.
Ron Regan spent a good part of his early life stealing, extorting, and beating people up, until the unlucky day he came out at the bottom end of a fight, slashed by a bottle and bleeding to death in an ambulance.
And I didn't know what was happening. I thought the ambulance was on fire. And as it filled with thick black smoke, moving through the thick black cloud, almost like a opening in this thick blackness. And at some point I began to hear screams. Multitudes of people screaming and wailing. And the best way I can describe it is it looked like a volcanic crater. And I could see like a huge lake inside this. But it was blazing with fire. I'd never seen anything like this, with the exception of hundreds of gallons of gasoline poured on the surface of water and ignited. But even worse than the sight, I began to see and to know that these voices were coming from those flames. And then I began to see bodies, silhouettes of human beings screaming, on fire, burning, but they weren't burning up. They were in an inferno of flames, but they weren't burning up. And they were screaming, and the smell, if you've ever smelled burning flesh, it was unbearable. And the screams were unbearable, but the most horrible thing was the pain, the emotional pain of loneliness and separation. And I saw other people, and they're saying, "Ronnie, don't come here. There's no way out."
Ron Regan became a Christian minister, preaching the gospel from his own experience.
Well, I have nothing against becoming a Christian minister. After all, I became one myself. But I have to admit that many researchers in the field of paranormal experience see these kinds of claims as culturally determined.
We die the life we live. That the events of our own life are replayed when we die, and that our own religious beliefs and culture is mirrored back and reflected to us in the type of dying experience that we have. So it should not come as any surprise then that people who report hellish experiences are primarily fundamentalist Christians who have a deep belief in hell.
To other people, the mere idea is absurd.
It worries me that most NDE reports are coming from the States where there is this underlying Christian belief about heaven and hell.
People like author Susan Blackmore once a parapsychologist herself, but now a debunker of myths about the afterlife.
I think there may be people who have had unpleasant NDEs, frightening NDEs, who don't dare talk about it because they feel, oh, that must mean I'm a bad person, and so they're really, really frightened, and live with a kind of guilt that there must be something they've done wrong. If the truth is that it's just the luck of the draw, what the situation they were in and the chemicals in their brain at the time that produced this hellish NDE, they are suffering guilt for nothing, a remorse for nothing, bad feelings for nothing. And therefore I think the sooner we can understand these things properly, the sooner we can help people like that see that it's not their fault that they had a hellish NDE.
Psychiatrist Dr. Stanislav Grof, who has spent a lifetime studying altered states, speculates that hell may in fact exist in another dimension of time and space.
So I see this as a real contact with the archetypal domain that has kind of independent existence, but somehow touches upon that. If you look at the images of hells from different cultures, you'll see the different tortures that are being experienced there. You can see the nooses, the strangling, you can see the pitchforks, the spits, the sharp pains, people cooking in, or being cooked in cauldrons and so on. So experiencing such extreme emotional and physical states. When we think about heaven as it is described in spiritual scriptures, not as a powerful inner archetypal experience, but as the physical heaven, then we come to such conclusions that we have disproved the existence of angels and God because we've explored systematically the astronomical heavens and we haven't seen any of those entities. Or if we know that there is heated nickel and iron as the core of the earth, that there is no place for caves of Satan, there cannot be hell there. So the idea is to get to hell or to heaven, you change your consciousness. So somebody can be here with us and be in heaven or hell, while everybody else is in Mill Valley. Those two are not incompatible in any way. So those are very, very real experiences, and they have to be studied by consciousness research. There's nothing that you can say reasonably about heaven or hell coming from physics or coming from biology or coming from medicine, because we are talking about states of mind.
Of course, the tortures of hell are not quite the same to all people, not even to all artists. To some, they are good for a last laugh. As that old atheist Voltaire lay on his deathbed, an ever-hopeful priest tried to convince him to recant. At the very least, to forswear the devil. Voltaire shook his head. "Is this any time to be making new enemies?" he murmured.
Most people seem to crave for evidence of life after death. And I think this is quite natural because we spend our lives almost being taught that we matter. You know, I must get a bigger car, a bigger bank balance, I must have people love me and approve of me, I must be nice to them so they'll like me. All of these things are me, me, me. In a way, that's the root of all our suffering. I mean, that's what makes us miserable and disappointed and feeling a failure and so on. And I think it's also what drives the desire for me to carry on forever. Because what's all this been for if I'm not going to carry on and reap the reward somewhere or another? Also, there's the question of suffering. It seems sort of to give an answer to the problem of all the suffering around us if we think that somewhere people will get their just desserts. I personally don't think any of that's true, because I don't think there is a little me in here who matters.
After researching a number of the life reviews, I was amazed to discover my own prejudice as a member of this culture, that we tend to look in terms of up, down. You're a good girl, you're a bad girl. You're a sheep, you're a goat. You go to heaven, you go to hell. That there's a paradigm of opposites that may not, in fact, be true. So, is there a hell? I don't think so. Have we focused more on the blissful near-death experiences rather than the others? Absolutely. We have to wonder why wonderful scholarship has discovered that medieval near-death experiencers saw lakes of fire, frightening folks, and then saw the bliss at the end. And contemporary near-death experiences are almost unilaterally blissful. You have to wonder if it's because we live in a society that doesn't want to be accountable for its wrongdoing and doesn't want to admit that there may be a darker side to life. I think those issues are real, and I think we need to encourage people who have had scary experiences to come forward.
We create our own heaven and hell. It's all relative. And in terms of heaven, it's when we feel good, we're in heaven, and when we're in the pits, we're in hell.
L'enfer, ça serait un endroit où on doit continuer où on continue à être entouré de gens qui ne savent pas s'assumer.
Yeah, that is a lot to take in, literally. Now I think that the video is gone on a different something else. I think that's a whole nother subject because they're saying like how you feel. Do you feel that you're in heaven or hell? That's what I think the question was given. Um, each chakra has many worlds, and the lower vibrational chakras are the hell rounds. Yeah, but being that how this is a subject about death and all that stuff, all that comes with it. I mean, we've seen examples of people who is having dreams before they go to the death, before they die. Seeing children who's telling people, well, don't be scared and all that. There are so many levels to that video. It's quite a deep video, really. I think that's the deepest one I've seen actually. And I don't know whether YouTube's gonna let me keep it up. No. They might strike me. But but I think yes, death is a transformation. You are of an energy. Well, obviously a higher source. I mean, they're talking about God and all this stuff, but there is definitely something higher, greater than that is able to indicate to you when your time is coming. Either it's a feeling or or like they say, relatives coming to let you know in advance. I mean, they talk about the ghostly children appearing to people, putting them at ease. You know, I feel there is always something greater than because, like I said, and I think others have said this before. We are all energy. We are energy. We are of the earth. We are the earth. True and true. Um, like I said, that's why I'm saying the way to treat most things is to have a table to ancestors. Because people are scared to talk to their dead relatives. They don't want to be known as weird. They don't want to be seen as, oh gosh, everyone's looking at me. Like, you have to talk to them as well because they come and they are the ones who will appear to you in dreams and visions and put you at ease. However, Though they talk about the hell where she said that she killed herself or something, and then she saw hell. I mean, maybe we can agree with that. If there is a hell, we don't know. No one's never come back to say, well, yeah, there is a hell or whatever. Right? There's only been reincarnation of people coming back in different bodies in different time zones, different everything else. I think a good example of that is Assassin's Creed, I can say, where he came back and he was of his ancestors. He was that man fighting with all the I think they were Mongolians. I can't remember who they was from, but he took on the ability of the ancestor in his body of the dead ones before him. Even when they project him, he saw all of his dead relatives in front of him, standing in front of him. So, as much as people are scared of the afterlife per se, the graveyards, you know, graveyards, graveyards, the ones you have to more worry about is the living ones. The living ones give you more problems than the dead ones. The dead ones would only joke you unless you call them up or something, or or if you're living in a place and they died in a bad way, they will appear. I mean, like they're not gonna hide themselves because they want you to see them. You know what I mean? So and I'm not gonna do an open panel on this because this is a very deep conversation to be had, and I'm sure others will cover this on their panels and talk about it and break it down because I know there is a bigger breakdown above from that documentary. I think that documentary broke down most of all the jargon, what people don't wish to want to face. They don't want to face certain things. They don't want to know about it. They put it at the back of their mind. Now, in this thing, what's happening now, many people have lost a lot of people due to that. So you have to not. I'm not saying expect it, but like when someone who's nearest to you have passed and they've already indicated to you that it's gonna happen, right? When they are arrested, you go to where they are. If I mean, some people do anniversaries, but even before the anniversaries, you go to where they are, or you have a picture of them. You just keep looking at the picture. Connect with their pictures. There are many heart chakra realms, but I'd rather go to the crown chakra realm. Yeah, that's the higher realm, the enlightened realm. But I'm sure King Higher Self. I know he's got a deeper something going on. I know you and King Hyper have hyper higher Aladdin. I'm gonna call you Aladdin. Sorry, Aladdin. We keep saying your name wrong. Um, have a deeper understanding about all this. You know, you know, there is free. There's the baby. I think no. I put it in. I put in the triple maiden. I think it's the triple maiden way. I can't remember. The life cycle. There's a life cycle, right? We all know there's a life cycle from birth. Most people say after you've been born, it's like you're dying anyway. Now I'll be thinking, wow, what does that mean? So, you know, I just think that documentary covered a whole heap. I don't even know whether YouTube's going to let me keep it up because there's a whole heap of medical words in it and all sorts. I mean, I'm going to see if they do let it up because there's a lot of information which can help other people whose people has died, even though the thing popped up. But like I said, you have to always celebrate these people. Even if you are drinking something, you pour some rum on the floor for them. I mean, obviously, right, you can mop it up afterwards. It's no biggie. You can set a space for them. It can be smallest space, a small table. You have your water, your candle, or tea light. However, you don't have to make it religious, you know, because because sometimes they want to communicate with you. That's why they send in the butterflies and the crows, and they could turn up in your dreams. I don't know. Like there's no other way. I can't break it down as others can do, like all articulate all that stuff. But I just feel that sometimes, right, you have to let them know. Yeah, I still remember you. Yeah, you talk about their fun times. Oh, yeah, remember when so and so used to do this? Remember when so and so used to do that? I feel all that helps. You know, me and my children, when the stepbrother died, we talk about when, like, the fun times when he was around, the things he used to do. We don't talk about, oh, yeah, like, the worst, or when you see them in the morgue or whatever. You have to talk about the fun times. You always think about the good times. And people who have lost parents, in particularly, right? You have their images, right? Those same people that has lost who is their mothers and all that stuff. They stick around for you. They're there. Like, you can feel them, their warmth. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I can't really put it into words. I'm gonna go find my children now. Hold on, let me find the children.
Imagine you're in.
Oh my gosh, I'm all quiet here. So anyway, I'm gonna show the past lives part now. So though we've heard that documentary, we're gonna watch a quick one. It's not even gonna be long.
Infant child suddenly started talking about piloting warplanes and people dying in balls of flames. Imagine if the kid, only 3 years of age, then mentioned the actual names of the people he'd flown with during the war. You'd likely feel a bit unsettled. Or how would it feel if your child woke up screaming in the middle of the night? For many nights and many weeks, they started rambling about being some Hollywood director from times past. Incredibly, both of these things happened to parents in the US not that long ago. The two kids joined a long list of children who have claimed to have had past lives. And what's fascinating, the children often make a good case. Today you're going to hear a few more incredible cases of kids that convinced people they used to be another person. To your everyday skeptic, such cases might sound dubious. But before you turn away, you ought to know that thousands of cases of kids who've claimed to have been someone else in another life have been investigated. And we don't mean by online mystics who will tell you for $9.99 how your Aunt Barbara is doing in heaven. Dr. Jim Tucker, professor of psychiatry and neurobehavioral sciences at the University of Virginia, is one such man who's put a lot of effort into trying to find out what's going on with these kids. Since the 1990s, he's been traveling all over the world in search of such kids, and of the 2,500 plus cases he's studied, few of them fail to fascinate. Before we get to some of the most confounding cases out there, first we'll tell you some things Mr. Tucker discovered during his many years of research. For one thing, it turned out that 70% of kids who claim to have lived past lives have lived the life of someone who hadn't had a very natural death, meaning the person had either died from an accident, murder, or they'd taken their own life. Tucker said during research he'd never investigate a case if the parent of the child couldn't name names or give addresses, or talk about how many places the child said he or she had been in their past life. If there was some information to work with, however, Tucker would meet the parents and child and take things further. Tucker might have started off a bit skeptical, but as things have turned out, some children just knew too much. You can't really call this research science. It's more pseudoscience, but still, the kids said some interesting things. They knew who they dated in their past life. They knew what their past wife had loved to do on Sundays. They knew how their past house was decorated, and they talked about the pet dog they so dearly loved. Usually, none of the information was something you could find out online or even in a book. What's also quite interesting, and maybe more convincing in the case for reincarnation, is the fact that most of the kids who claim to have lived past lives are only 2 to 4 years old. In other words, they're not quite at the stage of life where they want to manipulate people. They're also arguably too young to be making up strange stories about people long dead. Let's now look at some of the cases, and later on you can make your own mind up about the validity of the kids' stories. We're going to start with an American kid. What's good about Western cases is they're less frequent in those countries than in parts of Asia where many people believe in reincarnation. As it stands, according to Pew Research, only around 33% of American adults believe a person can come back to life as another person or being. In the UK, some studies have shown 29% of people believe in reincarnation, and in the rest of Europe, the numbers weren't far off. Still, being born again is much more of a thing in most of Asia. In parts of Southeast Asia, such as Myanmar, Laos, and Thailand, reincarnation is no laughing matter. It's a fact of life for many people. We'll come to the amazing stories from the East later, but seeing as Americans are for the most part skeptical of life after death, the good old US is a good starting place. The kid's name was Patrick, and in this case, he was investigated by a US psychology professor named Dr. Ian Stevenson, as well as the professor we just talked about. Patrick's mother.
So my typing. Thanks for those who stuck around to watch the next one. I mean, it's cartoony, but you know, it all makes perfect sense. Those who are still around. Thank you.
Mother had called the professors and told them she was convinced he was actually the reborn version of Patrick's deceased half-brother, Kevin. After some more chatting on the phone, the professors took off to the Midwest to talk in detail to the child and mother. They started with the mother. She told them that Kevin was born 14 years before Patrick. He seemed healthy at first, but just before he
Hi, JJ's wifey.
was 1.5 years old, he developed a strange limp. After a few tests at the hospital, it seemed Kevin was okay, but then, when he fell and broke a leg 2 days later, his mother started to become very worried. She was right to be concerned because as time went on, the doctors discovered that the boy had a form of cancer. One of the areas where he was most affected was his left eye. Kevin began a treatment of chemotherapy and radiation therapy, and after the 10th day in the hospital, he was sent home. This was all very unpleasant, but given the boy's young age, he seemed to smile and laugh as he had always done. 6 months later, he was rushed to the hospital with bleeding gums. Cancer had spread to his bone marrow. Doctors all but said his case was terminal. There was nothing they could do, although he did receive a blood transfusion. He died just a few days later. The mother married again and had another child, but the relationship didn't work out. And some years later, she had another child with another man. That child was named Jason. Soon after, she had a fourth child, and his name was Patrick. The mother said as soon as she held Patrick, she just knew he was somehow connected to her first son. The two babies looked similar, even though they had different fathers. Not only that, she soon discovered that Patrick had a problem with his left eye. The diagnosis was a corneal leucoma, a condition that can make it hard to see. In fact, the kid was pretty much blind in that left eye, as his deceased half-brother had been at the end of his short life. The conditions were not in the same ballpark at all, but blindness in one eye was the same symptom. Not only that, Patrick had a lump on his neck in the same place that his brother had a lump on his neck. It wasn't cancer, just a harmless nodule. But for the mother, these things were just too strange to be true. Things got even weirder when the mother found a kind of dark spot on Patrick's neck in the same place where his brother had a scar from tubes being inserted there. This was a sad story the professors were listening to, but nonetheless they checked the deceased son's medical records. They also checked the body of Patrick, of course, and it all rang true. There were indeed some strange coincidences. What was perhaps freakier is that when Patrick was able to walk, he walked with a limp just as his brother had. When the professors met him, he was already 5 years old, but he still had that unusual limp, even though medically his legs and gait should have been fine. Patrick looked like Kevin. He had a lump and a mark where Kevin had. He limped like Kevin. Okay, so what about Patrick's mind? Did he think he was his dead brother? Well, when he was 4 years old, he started asking his mother if he could go to the other house. He asked again and again to go to this place, a house where he'd once lived. He described it as a chocolate and orange house. His mother, of course, had changed houses as well as husbands since her first child had died. Then one day, he asked his mom if he could recall the day he had surgery. At first, she told Patrick that he was healthy and he'd never had surgery, at which point the young boy pointed to his ear, a place where the deceased boy had once had a tumor. The mother kept pictures of Kevin under lock and key, but one day Patrick discovered one and he ran to her and shouted, "Here's my picture, that's me." At other times, he'd talk about a puppy he once had, or should we say his deceased half-brother once had. He even recalled a day he went swimming with his grandfather and others, and a guy's head was dunked under the water. He was referencing events from Kevin's life. You might now be thinking, well, the mother could have made all that up. Sure, that's a possibility. A weird thing to do, but a possibility. The professors interviewed other members of the family, including the mother's sister and Patrick's siblings. They talked about how Patrick would often talk about heaven, although Patrick's father said his kid didn't talk to him about this past life. When the professors talked to Patrick, he told them about this other person he had been, although he did so as if he were with the other kid, not actually the kid. He said he went to the zoo with him and talked about how they'd play in the same bedroom, all the time describing a room that the professors found fitted the description of the dead son's bedroom. Patrick also told them about the time he went to the ranch and saw the bulls, something only his brother had done. Okay, maybe the case doesn't convince you, but keep watching because stranger cases are on the way. Now let's swing over to Thailand, a place where every day people try to please the spirits with bottles of Fanta. This is the case of a boy named Juta, who was 4 years old when his case was investigated. A few months after this kid took his first breaths in the world, his mother's brother died in a motorcycle accident in Bangkok. After that, Juta got very sick and came down with a terrible fever. He also developed 2 rather strange big spots on his left arm, right at the place where his deceased uncle had a similar marking. The uncle had started to get a tattoo, but after suffering a bit, chickened out. Instead of a drawing, all he had was the start of a drawing, which were 2 spots. Juta then started calling his own mother Little Noe, which was what her dead brother had called her. Things then got really weird when older folks would go around the house to visit. Juta would talk to the adults using informal language that kids just don't use with grown-ups in Thailand. Not only that, he put ice in their beer and stirred it with his finger, something his uncle used to do. And yes, Thais almost always add ice to the beer. The stuff gets warm there quickly. After the kid had given everyone a glass of beer, he'd take one for himself. He was 4, don't forget. And this wanting of beer happened all the time, something which mirrored his uncle's predilections. Juta also claimed that he once worked in Bangkok in construction. He hadn't even been to Bangkok. All this was heard by the investigators, but when they returned for a second meeting a few months later, little Juta was no longer talking in that adult language and he'd even gone off the beer, refusing one even if one was put in front of him. The spots on his arm were becoming harder to see, and according to investigators, the once grown-up boy had become a normal little boy. Juta's family believed that the soul of the deceased had entered Juta but had now left. The next case is similar but quite a lot more confounding. It was investigated in collaboration between U.S. professors and a professor of clinical psychology at the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences in India. It's about a woman named Uttara who at the time of the investigation was 33 years old. She had some mental health issues, so had been told to meditate. She did just that. But what happened next surprised her caregivers. She'd alternate between extremes of silence and hysteria, and sometimes start talking in a foreign language even though she couldn't speak any foreign languages. The doctors at the time thought she was speaking Bengali, although her parents told them she couldn't speak a word of it, never mind talk for ages in it. She was sent home, but there were problems, to say the least. She could no longer speak her native Marathi, and instead used her new language, something her parents did not understand at all. Bengali speakers came to the rescue, and they soon told her parents that their daughter was now claiming to be someone called Sharada. It seems Sharada thought she'd never even left Bengal. She didn't recognize people or things around her. It was as if her world was alien to her. In fact, she didn't even know what modern appliances were, like she was living in a time long before such things existed. After a few weeks in this state, Uttara came back. During the investigation, it was revealed that Sharada would make an appearance for a couple of days for a total of 23 times over a few years, each time forgetting who her family was and not understanding how something like a TV worked. Over time, details were collected when Sharada came around. She described the village where she lived in West Bengal, and she described her family and friends. It turned out that she thought she was living in the 18th century. What shocked the researchers is that when they searched for the names of Sharada's alleged father and 6 brothers, they'd all lived in West Bengal in the 18th century in a village like the one Sharada had described. On top of that, professors who were native Bengali speakers talked with Sharada, and they agreed that while she made a few mistakes, she was definitely fluent. Still, skeptics have said that the girl could have somehow secretly learned the language. That rings true when you find out a linguist said her way of speaking was not from the 18th century and her accent wasn't spot on. Was this really a case of a woman suffering from a severe case of multiple personality disorder, or was she really the part-time vessel for a possessor of souls? Let's finish with another story from the West. If you think these kids are all making things up, this tale might change your mind. It's the story of a Scottish boy named Cameron. At the time academics got to hear about this unusual story, he was 5 years old and living in Glasgow. They were told young Cameron believed he had another mother, and she lived a long way off on an island called Barra in the pretty remote part of Scotland called the Outer Hebrides. This island has just over 1,000 people living on it, but it seemed young Cameron thought he was one of them, or had been one of them. When the U.S. investigator arrived in Glasgow, he soon found that at the age of just over 2, Cameron kept asking his mother if they could go to Barra. He seemed obsessed with the place. In nursery school, he'd just walk around all day saying, "I want to go to Barra." So far, there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe he saw a beautiful Barra on TV and he liked the idea of looking for dolphins and whales, which you don't generally see in downtown Glasgow. But it was more than that. The kid talked in detail about his family in Barra. When he was asked about that family, Cameron said his father was named Shane Robertson. Apparently, the boy had been talking about this man from the age of 2.5. Unfortunately, it also emerged one day that Mr. Robertson had been out walking, slipped off a sidewalk, and fallen right in front of an oncoming car. That car, according to Cameron, was of a greenish hue or green and silver. His mother in Barra had long brown hair and it was cut short. He often cried for this woman, sometimes shocking the teachers at preschool when he talked about her. Cameron said he also had 3 brothers and 3 sisters, and one of the sisters was named Lindsay, although he couldn't recall all the other names. He said they lived in a big white house and it had lots of bathrooms, so Cameron's Barra family were obviously not short of cash. That house, he said, had lots of boxes outside it. Okay, so we're talking about a really remote place here, an island that can't be too hard to investigate in terms of what families lived there. We're also talking about a wealthy family, likely not your regular fishing family. Cameron gave even more information than that. He said he loved to swim in rock pools and went to the beach a lot. He also said he had a black dog with a white stripe down its chest, and the family would often play with it. He even described using one of those black rotary dial phones. Those things were around most of the 20th century, but you didn't see many of them by 1990. Definitely not in Scotland anyway. What's also important is that Cameron said he often watched planes come into land on the beaches of Barra. Now, Cameron never said he became an adult on Barra, but he also didn't mention anything about his own death. He used to often say that he'd merely fallen through into his new mommy's tummy. He said that one minute he was in Barra and the next minute he was growing up in Glasgow. There he had an older brother who, not surprisingly, soon got tired of hearing about Barra. Everyone who talked to Cameron soon realized he was obsessed. When the researchers talked to him, he wasn't the slightest bit shy as other kids had been during their research. He regaled them with tales of living on Barra, how he loved picking apples and hunting for crabs that always nipped him. He told about his father's black spiky hair, and he said those boxes outside his house he'd mentioned before were full of fish. In conclusion, he said when he was 4, he just fell out of bed, went down a hole, and appeared in his new mom's womb, although he called it a tummy. Okay, so the researchers were now loaded with information, and all they had to do was go to this tiny island and look around. They didn't go alone. They took Cameron and the family. The researchers were both excited but also apprehensive, since some things Cameron had told them didn't match up with some things the mother had said. For instance, he told her the house had stairs, but he told the researchers it was a 1-story abode. It's important to note, though, that he first talked about these places just after turning 2, and when the researchers arrived, he was 5. Nonetheless, the professors talked to Cameron's uncle and friends of his mother, and they said his stories were always the same. Maybe he had stage fright now, since the camera was turned on him. The only thing to do was set off. They landed there on the beach, which was the landing strip for a very small airport. As soon as the plane opened its doors and young Cameron was blasted by the fresh sea air, he was smiling from ear to ear. It was good to be home, he said. Still, at first, it was hard for the researchers to tell if he really knew the place. It wasn't as if he was still bumping into old friends and marching off to the nearest sweet shop. The team started asking around about a family that sounded like the one Cameron had talked about so effusively. A local historian said since there were so few accidental deaths on the island, he knew about them all. He had all the records going back to a time that seemed applicable to Cameron's descriptions of the island. Only one guy was killed by a vehicle, but the vehicle was a bus and the man wasn't called Robertson. This happened in the early 1950s. The historian also said that he knew of no Shane Robertsons, and while Robertson is a pretty common name in Scotland, there hadn't been so many on Barra. There was one Robertson family there at the moment, but they'd moved there recently. There was also another Robertson family in the 30s. Other things didn't match up. Houses with many toilets were a recent thing on the island. Cameron could have watched planes land, but he'd have to been on the northern part of the island, although he seemed to know the southern part better. Nonetheless, swimming in rock pools was a very popular activity for kids in the past. Was that it though? Did Cameron just have an amazing imagination for a 2-year-old? The researchers were about to give up when the historian called him a few days later. He found a Robertson family that had lived on the northern part of the island. The reason they didn't show up in the records is that when they stayed on Barra, they only did so for vacation periods. And listen to this, this fairly wealthy shipping family had a large white house built for them, and that's where they vacationed in the 60s and 70s. It was built right next to the beach. This house was called Sanderling, and according to some of the older residents on the island, it was often full of kids. Then the researcher and the historian made a breakthrough. They found the address of a man related to the Sanderling Robertsons, and he was still on the island, albeit living in a secluded place. They soon arrived at his house with trepidity and excitement and banged on the door. No answer. The team was about to leave when an old man walked out into the blistering wind and pouring rain, shouting, "I don't know anything, I don't know anything." The cold gust howled as the man retreated back to his house. The researchers knew they would likely not find any more evidence that Cameron, the Glaswegian, had once lived in this rugged island. Cameron was brought to the Sanderling though, and at first the place seemed to mesmerize him, and then he just looked very sad. He walked around the house as if he knew every part of it, and then at one point just stopped and ran to embrace his mother's legs. This is actually what often happens when these kids who claim to have lived past lives are confronted with their past. It emotionally devastates them to be back where they were, or think they were before.
Okay. So that's the reincarnation part, the death experience, the life after death, all in one. And this is a real good subject, I think it is. I wanted to even, if YouTube wasn't so ridiculous, I was going to even do the one with the there's certain places where like there is ghostly occurrences. Like there was one with a doll that's in Mexico, I think it is, and it's just like it's got a spirit of a child in it. Like the eyes stares at outwards, looking at you. It moves, and it's like the child's spirit went into that doll. But YouTube won't allow me to put it up. I'm sure of it. But with that said, now it's like 3:15 over here, and I'm gonna just go and you know go to sleep and stuff because you can like these are the subjects that I mean I like subjects like this, to be honest. It was up to me, I'd be putting up the most because people go through the most experiences. They just don't talk about it because they're deemed as weird. um on Vice channel they talk about the indigo children. Was it Vice News, I think, where they went to a new age. They talk about the indigo children. They talk about the chosen ones. Now, there are children who do return on a higher level, higher frequency, um, and it's like there are old souls. I mean, my younger one is just like that. She is exactly. I would call her a very old soul. The way she knocks certain things with her nails, the way she's ready. Like if she sees that you are down, even though children, they will cuddle you if they see you're upset or whatever. Children who have old souls and who has come back again, normally is like they say words, they say big words that normal 4, 5, 2 year olds, 5 year olds, whatever, don't normally say. So, um, you know, yeah, yeah, I get you, JJ. I mean, I'm not annoying you. I'm just like just saying because I'm stumbling now. Tiredness to start licking now. So These things are death. I know people hate talking about death. Heaven knows why. We talk about births. We talk about um, coming together. We talk about happy times. We never talk about deaths or I can't think of the other subjects that people don't even touch on. There's a few subjects we don't touch on. But even though we don't believe in the Godhead or the God or whatever, because I'm not Christian neither, so I definitely don't believe in it. I believe in Agunguns, which is the ancestors. I believe that ancestors do walk with you. Even today, I felt like putting libations to my ancestors, literally. Like, so something sort of came over me, per se. So, like I'm saying, like, you set a small table, you put their photographs on the table or a book from the funeral. You don't fear not looking at their funeral books. Okay? You have to be choosy who you want to be around you, because some die of terrible deaths. So you have to research all that. And then you place them on a table, or you place a space for them to eat food with you. You talk about them. And when others talk about them in a bad way, right? And if you know them really well, you talk about them in a good way, because they're the ones who will keep you safe and everything else that is going on in the world. That's why this death, talk about death, is very important. It's very, very important, you know. So, as much as they talk about people suddenly turning into Christians and all that, but there's more things further beyond that. So, like, your ancestors, like I said, will always guide you. If there's something you feel you like I keep saying with videos before regarding bloodlines. I know this is not a bloodline video, but I'm just saying. I'm okay. I'm just saying. These so-called spirits, ghosts, guides, right? They will guide you to stuff. They will guide you to stuff. They will make ways for you. They will be with you, right? So you have to, you know, know. You just have to be in the know when certain things is happening, or you talk to recommended people who can help you. Like, because I saw the documentary was a bit much. I know Big Philly went through a grieve. I think beast mode. Quite a few people's been through grieving. That's why I stopped it. I played the water, and I said to everybody, and I also put in the chat, make sure you have a glass of water. So when I stopped it, or even if you're drinking a beverage, because some people probably don't want to have a water. You take a drink, and then I gave it a little time, and then I put it back on, because it's a very touchy feely subject, especially for those who is going through bereavement times. So that's why I feel that this needs to be spoken about anyway as well. And I don't want it to trigger people, because it's not good to trigger people. Sometimes it's better if they just don't watch the video and they walk away. I'd rather them do that, because I don't want to trigger something in somebody, you know, that shouldn't be triggered. That's why I looked at the other religions and how they deal with death. Right. I mean, the last one they spoke about, they always talk about Christianity, the way the Muslims look at it, the way the who, I can't remember who now, the Buddhists look at it, and it's the same with ether as well. There's always a reincarnation. A child, when a relative die at that time, a child will appear, a child will come through. So sometimes it's that person that's come back again, or or the child will look like that person. It'll be really spookily. Oh yeah, like they're just like my auntie who died how many years back. People don't talk like that. I mean, it's not. I mean, it's nice to talk about it in a intellectual way, but then you have to just talk about it in a simple way. Just say what it is, what it is. Because when we're talking to our folks who's not into certain things, when you really look at the whole picture, they're coming because they have a message, and the children who come back as the relative, right? They want to show you certain things sometimes that you don't even know about. They will come back in a form, or in most cases, they would appear to children, which has happened to my children. They saw their uncles in the room sitting down, so they would appear to them, in the in and maybe it's a comforting feeling when you see them. There's nothing to be scared about. Yeah. In most horror movies, they talk about scaring of graveyards. Now, like I said, you should be more scared of the living than the dead, right? Because if you go to a graveyard and you start bothering the dead people, obviously they're going to want to come up and give you hell. That's why Baron Samedi makes sure that they stay under earth. He makes sure that they stay there. He deals with the lower. He deals with that with that ghostly element, that spirit. He makes sure they don't come up zombified. And even the man one there said, yeah, the pseudo religions and whatever. Yeah, there may be pseudo religions, but they give many people comfort during bereavement time. So you can't spit on people's stuff. But like I said, I'm Christian. I believe in the Agunguns, and they are the ancestors. They're the ones who will come. Because even while the video is playing, there was a noise here, and there's nothing. There's nothing anywhere. There's nothing where the noise dropped. I can't remember whether there's anything there. Yes, they left because of the God words kept coming up. I mean, there's no need to leave. To me, I feel there's no need to leave for that, because that video had more in it, a lot in it. There's a lot more in that video, talking on a lot of levels, because they went from talking about reincarnation, then they went to then they went to life after death, and then they went to seeing spirits, where like a Native American little girl was there, and then the lady, because she's a shaman, she knew a way so that that little girl can meet her mother so they can be at peace. But people forget one thing: when they build in houses as well, they build them on graveyards. Like in England here, right, there was a massive plague in England, and certain parts is very eerie. Blackheath is eerie. Somewhere down Deptford is eerie. There are eerie parts. Certain parts you'll see like blood. You will see the blood, right? So, oh yeah, and I know people hate talking about slavery, so we'll throw that one in too. Now, I know people don't like talking about certain, like I said, things. Now, look at it this way now. I was watching Ghost Adventurers. They went into one house where they had the slaves kept underneath the house, and they called on the priest and priestess to come to send them home. Now, why the priest was there doing the libations, they started breaking down crying because why? They felt the pain of the people in that house. So, as much as people don't want to, I mean, you have to be open minded to certain things because we all go through death in all different ways with I'm trying not to say babies and stuff like that because it happens. There's stillborns, there's all sorts. Some children don't even want to come back here, or they make it so they'll come back here. Right? They just end up not being born. So there is no fear. That's why I stopped it. I said drink a little water, and then I put it back on. Maybe I could have let it go a little longer, but then they started going somewhere else. When I see the video going somewhere else, that's why I stopped it. So instead of me playing, because remember I said, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna play with my children," and then and then I tapped on that video, and then when I saw it was I said, I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, YouTube, YouTube medical information coming to my life," but I feel with this one, it might go true. It might go true. I'll just see. But and then and then the children come afterwards now because they're saying, look, this is what's happening in different countries. The boy remembered all these things. So when they went to the house, now he started break down and cry because they took him back to the place where he started before the people died. So I don't know. I'm just saying that's how I interpret certain things. So that's what I'm saying. If people die, if people have passed, transitioned, whether it be a small or little one, your mother, your father, whoever, you set a table for right. They will eat with you because in New Orleans, this is one of the things that New Orleans people do. They set a table, a space for the relative, right? Or like I said, you set a table, you have the images of the people, you set it in a nice corner. People don't have to see what you're doing. And then you have the what you call it? The paper from when they bury. You have the water, you put their image there, and then you talk to them. You say hi, right? You say hi, mom. How you doing? You talk to them like they're here, because they will hear you, because their spirit's always here. So yeah, I think that's as much as I can say. So with that said, I ain't gonna go and prolong and go on and go on and go on and go on. Right? You, we, who is the living, we have to remember them. That's why it's called ancestor worship. So when people talk about living, I'm scared of death. So ain't we gonna die sooner or later ourselves? I don't know. Anyway, people, right? So basically, I'm gonna leave it right there because I'm gonna see how YouTube's gonna behave now. I'm gonna see. I put it on age restricted because of the surgery, so I don't know. Some people might see, some people might not see. I don't know. I don't know. I just see. I just hope that how the video goes true, because it have plenty information inside of that documentary. There's so much information. I don't even need to put nothing else behind it, but that thing has covered everything, and even said the same thing I said in the beginning. So yeah. So at the end of the day, like I said, and like even with the rum, because I'm supposed to do an ancestors bit, so hopefully I can do the ancestors bit on here. You get your rum and you call out their name, you say their names, you say their names, and I mean there is a way to say it, but anyway, you'll see when I do it, when I do it, whenever that happens, because I had to re put that one up there. So don't be afraid, even if you're there when your relative is going, and even that's a blessing by itself. Watching someone leave well, the so-called earth plane, that's a blessing by itself. And if your relative die with the mouth open, you try to close the mouth, even though when they go through that other thing, they close the mouth. You try to close the mouth. You touch their hands. Yeah, they feel cold to touch. Because I know when I touched my gran, she felt it just felt like skin. It felt different to how I thought she would feel. So you don't fear nothing. You don't have no fear. The most you do is make sure you're protected, and then you go in and then you do the necessary. You tend to them, and then make sure they're all right. You don't wait to the anniversary to go visit them. You visit them before the anniversary, right? You visit them before. You don't wait till anniversary, come up with all the balloons and putting balloons up in the air. Ooh. You go, you go to their grave and you talk to them, and they will, and then maybe they might appear to you, maybe they might not, maybe they might throw something down in the house. You don't be scared. You don't be scared. If you see spirits, you ask them, "What are you doing here? What you come here for?" If it's a bad spirit, you smoke it out. You use the myrrh, frankincense, and the charcoal. You smoke him out. Or what's the next one? Sage, if you can handle it. So that's how you deal with them. But if it's a good spirit, it will be there. It will guard the house. So you have nothing to fear. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with death. Like I said, death is just another step up, because we birth, we can't age, and then the next step is oh yeah, then we get older and then we die. So there's nothing to fear. There's nothing to fear. Yeah. So like I said, I'm not a Christian. I look like a Muslim. I look like a Muslim, but I am really into the ether. And I will tell you a story, what my mum told me another time, to confirm why this ether thing is good for me. It might not be good for everybody, but it's good for me. So you have to have the understanding. You have to get to know yourself. People talk about getting to know myself, getting to know myself. This is all part of getting to know yourself. This is the whole. Okay? It takes a bit of time before you come into your whole, into that being. But you don't fear death. You don't fear it. Okay? So me gonna stop, because me gonna start waffle, and then I'm gonna be here till like 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, and my children's gonna look at me like I'm mad. But yeah, but when I do the ancestral one, alright, but that's the start. You always start with a table. There's books that can guide you along this. Sometimes it's not always good to follow Mr. Google and what they're saying. And if you feel that you have to pick up a feather, or you have to pick up something what your mother likes, if that one lights cigar, you put the cigar there, or you burn it, or if you're a smoker, you give it to them. If they're a drinker, you put the rum there, right? It will go anyway, because it evaporates. It's water. It is water you put there. The water will bubble. That's when you know that they're there. So, like I said, there's nothing to fear. Nothing to fear. Nothing. So Okay, so I'm definitely gonna jump off. Let me see what you are saying. Okay, where is everybody? Oh yeah, Nosy says good topic. JJ Wifey's here. Queen. Uh, yeah, Nosy. Oh yeah, it was a really good subject. Nosy said it was a good subject as well, and I think Miss Wise said it as well. Sassin looks at things on a deeper level, and I know Sunset does too. Nosy says, "Wow, big O, let your light shine." Oh, thank you. I'm going to prepare the table. Yeah, hopefully I'll come with more instructions, a bit more clearer, because sometimes you can't get the two mix up because there's instruction and then there's video. So yeah. So okay. So with that said, I'm definitely gonna jump off. Let's put the where's the light in the square? Oh yeah, I see two different lights on the square. One from Nosy, one from, and I think Miss Wise did one as well. Saida might have gone to her channel. No, everybody come in. Right, this time I wasn't scared of them. This time they didn't jump me, but just continue. So yes. So the next one, I don't know. I put up a few. Um. Oh, that's okay. I put up a few schedule lives. So hopefully I will do them with my red hoodie or my purple hoodie. And um hopefully when I sort out what's going on here, because I need to actually take a break because I've been on it. But I might leave it for a month because I need to actually deal with some other stuff. So um so those who's got the emails, if you need any more information on the table wise part of things, I can guide you through that. Um those who's got Instagrams, I'll guide you that way too. Because I think every melanated black person need to know about these things, whether you're indigenous or African or wherever you think you are. So there are other videos about other information on here. Take a look, work your way down. Then you can see how much my talking has improved. My reading has improved a little bit too. And yeah, just yeah. Till next time, innit? So yeah, later. Yeah, later. Big O. Assassin. Oh gosh, let me go through the names before we go again. Sorry. It's like I'm prolonging the video longer. Okay, we need to go through everybody. Sensei Saida. Optimus Prime. I would say his name wrong. Optimus Prime. Chrissy. Lady Chrissy. Miss Nosy. Just J. Mama Amazon. Mr. Tinfoil himself, Coppertone. Mr. Big Philly OG, Sunset Gift. Ghetto Child. The Assassin, aka JJ, See, I just know you're JJ. I don't even like that assassin part. Formerly JJ. Who else is there? Miss Wise. Oh, did I say ghetto child? Ghetto child. Oh, we had full house today. Let me see. Who else? Who else? Who else? Who else? Truth Master J. Oh, where my stomach? You see other people. Hold on. I see Aladdin in here earlier. Oh yeah. Bronze Flat Power. Big O. Hold on. Where's it? Oh yeah. King of Higher Self. Who else? Who else? Who else? No, I miss nobody. Indigenous Queen. Oh yeah, I said you twice. See, I said you twice. I said you twice. I think I got everybody now. Okay. So with that said, have a good night. I'm gonna leave it up and see how this goes. Please, fingers crossed that this video goes through. Let's make sure this video goes through for those who need it. Because I know people, people might say, oh no, 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 I don't want that. You might need it. Okay. All right. So I've put up a prepping video as well to do a food shortage. Take a look at it. That's another important thing for you Americans over there and also here in the UK. So, yeah. I might do an open panel next time. I'll see how I feel. Because, yeah, sometimes it's just good to get the information out than the open panel. So, with that said, I am going to hop off now. I'm going to put my water on actually as well, if I forget. Oops. Later.